for the day. Thanks for bearing with us while we solved a few IT issues this morning. I'm going to turn it over to Jay now to give you a few logistics of the day. If you need help with anything, look me up, I'll be here. Any questions, things like that. So enjoy the day. Hopefully by the end of the day, our goal is to answer all your questions around LiDAR. Here's Jay.
All right. Thanks, Ken. All right, welcome everybody. Just an additional housekeeping kind of a thing. We have, everything's going to be in this room as far as presentations go, so make yourselves comfortable. There's pastries and coffee and breakfast stuff this morning. They'll bring lunch in, so we'll have lunch in here as well. So everything will kind of be here. This afternoon, if we get to it, you know, the fog's kind of changing some things, so we'll have to see how that goes in the afternoon. We'll have some demos and out in a quad, and then we'll have our closing reception downstairs in the cafeteria. You guys all got raffle tickets, so we'll have the raffle at the closing reception. So you got to be here to win, so that kind of thing. But while you're in here, and while in between each of the presentations, we'll have time for you to kind of take a break and maybe go talk to some of our exhibitors. Over here we have Esri, we have Cougar Rakin, I never pronounced that right, Leica Geosystems, Wingtra, and then our program over there in the corner. So if you have questions throughout the day, feel free to ask them about their products, ask them about their services, anything you have. I'm trying to think if there's anything else. As Ken said, we are a National Science Foundation funded program for LiDAR technician training. And we have a certificate program coming in the fall of 26 for LiDAR technician training. So it consists of a beginning class and an advanced class, along with photogrammetry, drone piloting. Actually, no, I just wrote the class, I forgot what it was. But those are the major ones. So we're expanding into LiDAR, just because the idea is that as industries and organizations are realizing the use for this technology, they're starting to rush to it. They don't know what it is, but they said, I need LiDAR. I don't know what it is, but I need LiDAR. And so as that begins to happen, we need more skilled professionals to acquire accurate data and good data and process good data. So that's what we're kind of setting up here. And like I said, working with the National Science Foundation, set that certificate up. With those classes, that certificate program will be available here starting in fall of 26, along with our bachelor's program. So we just recently had a bachelor's program. Yes, we are a community college, but we have a bachelor's program now approved for drone technology and drone and autonomous systems. And within that, there's multiple courses that are embedded into that program. We do have another LiDAR class. So students that don't take the certificate but go into the bachelor's program will be exposed to LiDAR technology and processing data. So because it's becoming more and more of a need in today's society as far as with reality capture. So throughout the day, you will hear from different industries talking about how they use LiDAR. You'll hear from different providers that talk about how to process the LiDAR data and effective use cases and what do you use this LiDAR data for. So we are lucky enough to have a lot of great speakers scheduled today. We did have a little bit of a change in the schedule. We have schedules that are provided to you at the door. The FBI evidence response team, if you guys saw that initially on some of our flyers, had to back out. They got busy. So I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, big picture wise. But yeah, they if we have when we have one, probably when we have it next year, they'll be at our next one. So, but aside from them, like I said, we have a lot of great speakers talking throughout the day that you can learn from ask questions too during the presentations. There's time for the presentation, but there will be time for questions and answers if you guys have questions. We will have a photographer running around here, so just, you know, if you see the photographer coming, make sure you're not putting a Danish in your mouth at that particular time. So just be conscious of that. And then we are capturing video that we will have, be able to stream on our YouTube channel for posterity and that kind of stuff as well. So, yeah, again, my name is Jay Seidel, and I'm head of the drone program here. So if you have questions, I'll be running around throughout the day. But sit back and enjoy. I'm going to introduce our first speaker, our keynote speaker. I didn't prepare an intro, but we are lucky and privileged enough to have a expert on reality capture and LiDAR data as far as use cases and applications. Pete Kelsey, who's done, who recently had spent 3 weeks at Alcatraz, right? 3 weeks, about 3 weeks at Alcatraz, scanning the island comprehensively and finding things that people didn't know existed, and creating that not just for environmental purposes, but for structural integrity and historical integrity services. He's been on multiple projects. He's also the LiDAR guy on Skinwalker Ranch. If you know, you know. But yeah, I'm very happy and honored to have Pete here to talk to you guys about LiDAR. So Pete, come on up.
Yeah, I tend to wander.
Is it just a switch? This goes back to that technical thing that we had.
Tell you what, while we're working, switching that over, thank you, Jay. Where are the students in the room? Cool. Y'all are in the right place at the right time, and I'm going to show you why. No, that's control freeze. It's probably right click on the desktop.
You see the good stuff.
The trouble with doing what I do is that most of the data I work with, I'm not allowed to share. So I'm having to use my own laptop, so forgive us while we're switching things around. All right, good.
Almost. Sorry about that.
But I don't know. What was it? Because it's an image, it's not. Oh, so it's like the sky is not that. I mean, there's plenty of horses. But it does. I mean, I wrote So I have a guy who was just like, he's an expert. But he doesn't have right. He really drills the military all the time. So I'm trying to work it out. But I think it's but I know but now, so that's the whole thing. So that's everything. But you see, as everything we'll pass it off, but it's jazz experts. But
That's kind of, so is that like the does it have a
oh yeah, and then we're using and how that works with there's so much out there that I don't have to learn experts. We're not certain when but we would rely on wisdom.
whatever you understand what a single data point right? Difference between
That's a big so trying to find or all of this stuff is siloed. Maybe you guys nor do you want to. So how do we bridge that gap? I don't know. I don't think it's
SCS, yeah, our office. We have a satellite office in Huntington Beach, but the headquarters is in Washington. Right by here. I'm in charge of my coworker Ryan is in charge of Pennsylvania. Well, I started in the company, like I wanted to take the first week as a field technician, that's what it is. It's entry level, and then slowly I like worked my way not up, but it's like that got a little easy for me, so I feel like I can do more. So they gave me like some data stuff.
While we're waiting for the screen to get flipped over, I just wanted to let you know a little bit about Fullerton College and what we've been up to here regarding LiDAR technology and interdisciplinary work. We were taking groups of people out to conferences for professional development, especially in the area of manufacturing. Manufacturing technology is changing rapidly. And we have a metrology program here at Fullerton College, so the science of measurement. And if you kind of think about LiDAR and measurement, on the manufacturing side, it's all dealing with microns and things like that. Maybe on this side, it's dealing with, cityscapes and things of that nature. So we thought, well, maybe these people can actually work together. So we have a significant amount of work that we've been doing from the drone program over to crime scene analysis, into our manufacturing area, and it's actually been a lot of fun. And if you think about the applications and the changes lately, looks like we're going to get ready to go. As you go through the day, think about the applications. From a crime scene perspective, if you recall those murders that were in Idaho, the college students, they wound up tearing down the house. And that was one of the first times I realized how important digital twins were, because they made the judge made the decision that the digital twin of that house would count as living evidence for that trial. So they knocked the house down. So the world is changing around digitization, digital twins, LiDAR, from really the micron scale all the way up. So enjoy your day and think creatively about how you can use this in your work and in your schools.
Perfect. Okay. I have been, my history, I cut my teeth in AEC, Architecture, Engineering, Construction, for longer than I care to admit, about 25 years. That began with starving and not enjoying it and realizing I needed a skill. And there was this new thing way back then called AutoCAD. I went and learned AutoCAD. I took to it like a fish to water. Then I had to choose, what discipline, how to focus those AutoCAD skills. I chose civil engineering, land surveying, the geospatial world. And got extremely lucky because I found a civil engineering firm in Phoenix who I essentially cut a deal with, which was, I'll show you CAD if you'll teach me civil engineering land surveying. And we were off and running. I took to civil engineering and land surveying very quickly as well. Now, I'm not a licensed engineer or surveyor, but been doing it a long time. Trying to think of the really short version of this. I then went to work for Autodesk for almost 12 years. I was the worldwide technical evangelist for civil products. Not bad for a non-civil engineer. So if you've ever heard of Civil 3D, AutoCAD Civil 3D, I was part of the team that brought that product to the world way back then. So the important part of that to me in terms of today is that my background is geospatial. So while I am completely enamored, in love with all things reality capture, what I've learned, and this is recently, I would say in the last 2 years, that reality data is, to me, is as good as it gets. Reality data that is not spatial is not worth very much. It's just a pretty picture, okay? And I'll show you some examples why. And if I just went over your head and what did he just say? If it's not tied to the ground, if I can't take my data and it doesn't drop into Google Earth right where it belongs, I don't care. It's just a pretty picture, okay? So you'll hear me harp on that a bit. Okay, so that's my background. In the last 10 years or so, I've been chasing great stories. That's what makes me go. I love the technology, but one of the battles I fought when I was at Autodesk was most tech companies lead with a story, lead with a product and say, go find me a story that supports the product. And I was the maniac waving my hand saying, that's backwards. Go find a great story that the tech can make even better, and your audience will expand exponentially. And that's what I've been doing for 10 or 15 years. So what does this slide mean? I don't know what chromosome I'm missing, but I chase great stories. I'll go anywhere, I'll try anything, underwater, underground, from aircraft. You know, I'm a drone pilot. I'm going to show you a lot of this, but that's sort of where this comes from. I love a great story, and the thing that isn't said a lot about reality capture, of which LiDAR is a key component, it is an incredible tool for telling stories. You know this. You see a point cloud and you go, wow. And that, if that isn't one of the most powerful words in the English language, because wow is, I got you, right? It's, I have your attention. You are already leaning in, you're already emotionally investing. We'll talk more about that. So this is what I've been doing for a bunch of years. I'm going to drill into a few stories. Once I figured this out, that reality data is such a great storytelling tool, television was just a natural fit. So I've done a lot of TV in the last 10 years or so. And I'll show you a bit of that. This is a former version of myself, 20 years ago. Very different hairstyle. This was one of the first. It's the oldest photograph I can find of being in the field with a terrestrial laser scanner. So this is an old Regal scanner. This is in a remote part of Alaska. If you've ever rode the Alaska Railroad between Anchorage and Denali National Park, the train stops on this amazing bridge and they let you take pictures. We scanned that bridge. It's called the Hurricane Bridge. It was phenomenal. Bears, moose. I got a million stories, but they require adult beverages and more time than I have. Point was, that's where I got started. It's been basically right from the beginning, it's just, wow, this is cool stuff and can be applied to everything. And that might sound like a bold statement, but once I take you through some of this stuff, I hope you'll agree with me. Easter Island. So, as the freshly minted worldwide technical evangelist for Autodesk, I was working for the senior VP of sales. And a cat like that cares about two things. What did you sell today? And what are you going to sell tomorrow? Basically, where's the revenue? And I said, I have this idea. I want to go to Easter Island, and I want to use our technology there and see what happens. And there's another one of those people in your lives that that you cross paths with, and somehow he said yes, and my life changed, literally. Went to Easter Island, scanned the Moai, actually modeled the whole island, and this was 2007. This was a long time ago. Laser scanners were this big. It was nuts, but it was life-changing for a couple of reasons. One, just personally, what an adventure, right? Easter Island, my God. Scan them all. I got this amazing tattoo I can't show you that hurt bad. The media picked it up. We got it in Fortune magazine. This was 2008. This was during the financial meltdown. And a financial magazine picked up this story that Autodesk goes to Easter Island and scans culturally, you know, valuable sites and stuff. It was amazing. But the most important part for me came at our annual sales event in Vegas. There were 4,000 people. Autodesk is a huge company, right? All the resellers, all the partners, the entire global sales staff in this room. And the woman I met on the island, a dear friend of mine to this day, she got up and presented the project to everyone. And she just killed it. She was scared to death. She had tears in her eyes, and she basically told the room of us, "Thank you for saving my country." And the SVP who was sitting next to me elbows me in the ribs, and he says, "Wow." And I said, "Yeah, that's pretty powerful stuff." And then the woman on the other side of me said, "Pete, turn around." And I turned around and I looked at the audience, and about 2/3 of them were in tears. This was as close to an epiphany as I've ever had, because I watched this technology do that to a room full of people. Talk about emotional investment. Talk about, because these are people who sell software. Nobody's ever going to give a about software. People don't care about software. They care about what they can do with it. So this was an incredible day. It's literally where my sort of professional life changed from black and white to color. It's like, whatever that was, I want more of that. I want to do that for the rest of my days. So that's where it began, and that's what I've been doing ever since. The data, hey, in 07, this made people gasp. And people fell out of their chairs. This wound up in National Geographic magazine, super cool. Moving right along. This is the USS Arizona Memorial in Pearl Harbor. Because the problem in the tech corporate world is once you do something cool like Easter Island, then the SCP says, "What's next? What have you done for me lately," right? So this came up, and it was essentially nobody had surveyed the ship in like 40 years, not since the 80s. And I raised my hand and I said, "I want to do that. I'm a veteran. I love history. This is a great story. Talk about a great story that everybody knows. It ticks all the boxes." Trouble was, I didn't know how the heck we were going to do it. So this was 2012. But look what we did. Subsea LiDAR, multi-beam sonar, underwater photogrammetry all mashed together a little over 10 years ago. Created a virtual reality experience like this. It just, again, the media went nuts. I've made, I think, like 3 documentary films since. It was just amazing. And the coolest part, again, to me, I'll call it sort of the human side, that emotional investment side, was I got invited to the 75th anniversary of the Pearl Harbor attack, to what's called the Survivors Dinner, and the Arizona crew members still living and their families were in a room like this, and I got to take them through the project and the data, and then I went and handed them 3D prints of their ship that we created from the data. I'll never forget it as long as I live, because people were going to have these 90-year-old guys say, "Thank you. Thanks for doing what you're doing. This is really powerful." It was a great day. But what it all has in common, there's a formula here, right? A great story, a great team, and innovation. That's a common thread here, with the elephant in the room being reality capture, by the way. Everything I do, that's at the center of it. So, who has heard of Skinwalker Ranch? Okay. It's okay if you haven't. How do I describe the ranch? The ranch, I guess the technical explanation, or the explanation you'll see in the media, is the most active paranormal hotspot on the planet. Now, a third of you probably just went, I'm out of here. Paranormal? What? Bear with me. So, it's in northeast Utah. I got the call to be a part of the show 6 years ago. I had never heard of the place, I had never heard of the show. I'm like, okay, it's a gig, yeah, so let's go. But the conversation for me started with, tell me about your existing digital assets. It's one of the first questions we in this biz always ask. What do you have so we don't go recreate it again? And 9 times out of 10, this is one of the big opportunities for you students, 9 times out of 10, the answer is digital what? Right? That happens all the time. The point there is the demand for this type of work is off the charts, okay? Even at ranches where UFOs and stuff are running around like crazy, okay? Well, they said, well, we've done some things, but we don't have a lot. I said, okay, that's the fit for me. Let's go map the entire property, which in this case is 512 acres. This is the team / cast. We do all kinds of crazy things at the ranch. If you want it, it's the #1 show on the History Channel, which blows my mind, but it is. The cool part is 2 of these guys, Eric and Travis, are actually physicists. This maniac is working on his 3rd PhD. The guy has spent his entire adult life in school, but he's a smart cat, and so is Eric. And anyway, so we're trying all sorts of things at the ranch using all of my gear. I mean, we're talking terrestrial laser scanning, SLAM LiDAR, photogrammetry, drone-based terrestrial, GPR, multispectral, thermography. I'm probably forgetting some, but literally everything. Why? Again, if you don't know the story of the ranch, what is true without a doubt is that EMI, electronic magnetic interference, is rampant on this property. If it's electronic, it doesn't work there. Everything from your phone to the crew who shoot the show, you know, camera and audio, batteries drain in seconds, minutes, I mean, just crazy stuff. On my very first visit there, I had a VTOL drone up in the air. The company's gone, sadly COVID was the end of that small company. But essentially a flying wing, takes off like a helicopter transition, a lot like the Wingtra, but the Wingtra's baby brother. And I had this thing up flying a photogrammetric survey and lost control of the drone. I mean, literally a dead stick. It stopped responding. And I've got, at the time, it was like 25 grand up in the air, so I'm freaking out, right? It's part of pilot training that you never get enough training for. It's like, okay, let's talk about panic. Let's talk about when you have a very expensive asset in the air that you can't control. Anyway, if that training exists here, Jay, at Fullerton, sign me up. Anyway, a dead stick, it went into an orbit and orbited until the batteries went dry and then lawn darted into the ground. Fortunately, the drone, the damage was minor, but I couldn't explain it. The vendor couldn't explain it. Pulled the SD card, run the photogrammetry, And in the data, what should have been topographically a really flat part of the property, there was about a 30, 40 degree bend in the data. Like, what? How did that happen? And it remains a mystery to me and to everybody else to this day. Best explanation I've had is something to do with the GPS, with the geotagging of each image went screwy somehow. So the data, as a result, looks screwy as well. Weird. Anyway, so ever since, just because I'm stubborn, I've been coming back to the ranch to try to figure out just what the heck is going on. And I still don't have a lot of answers. This is the one piece of LiDAR that I've flown. I flew this with a DJI M300 and a Phoenix LiDAR Recon XT. This is the one piece of LiDAR that the owner of the ranch has made public. So if you're interested in the show and curious about what we've done, you can Google like Skinwalker Ranch LiDAR and you'll find its URL. This is the Phoenix LiDAR app, all web-based, and you can navigate through the data. It's eastern part of the property. Sadly, there's nothing weird in it. The data set looks great, okay? Which is the other frustrating thing about this crazy piece of property, is that things aren't weird every time. It's, what's the word, transient. Sometimes the data is really screwed up and sometimes it's perfect, okay? This one that looks completely normal is actually public if you're curious. This, no one has seen. It's fun about doing a gig like this because the NDAs for television are about this thick, right? Everybody familiar with SLAM LiDAR? Yeah? See if I can remember. Simultaneous localization and mapping. Yes? Jay says yes. I always wonder about that one. Of course, if you're not familiar with SLAM LiDAR, this is mobile. You can walk with it. You can put it in a car. I've used it on a skateboard on a runway at an airport. You can get really creative with it. And if you know a bit about SLAM, you can actually see the path that this was walked with a scanner. And the reason it looks like that is because the puck, the scanner, is rotating. So you see the 32 lasers in this puck, you know, spraying and getting returns as I walk this thing. The other thing that's cool, unique about this is, let me make sure I get this right. That's the command center, and that's Homestead 1. Scanned both outside and inside. And there's this cool app that's been out for a while called Nubagon, which has this feature in it called X-ray, which is so cool because it will render a point cloud to make it look like an X-ray. It's really, really slick when you're doing scans that involve exterior and interior. It gives these unique kind of perspectives. But I did this one last spring, if I remember right. Hasn't been used in the show, wasn't used during when we were filming, so I'm not violating an NDA. But it's always fun to show folks stuff sort of behind the scenes at the ranch. This is the entire ranch, LiDAR, point cloud, colorized, geo-referenced, 512 acres. This we did last year with, what was the bird? They're out of Florida. Centera, I think.
Census Centera.
Thank you, thank you. The Centera. Centera 5, actually, because the 6 is now out. So we flew this with the 5. Impressive easy gear. Had a yellow scan sensor in it, and the data was perfect. And what's crazy about working at this place is, hey, it's perfect. And then the other half of the room is, yeah, but it's perfect. You know, we're hoping for something odd, right? So anyway, this has never been made public either. So when I say we have LiDAR of the entire ranch, we do. Now hold on to yourselves. It's a shame that the FBI isn't here, because what I'm about to take you through is the coolest forensic thing I've ever done in my entire career. I'm not kidding. So I know that the subject matter is a little, it's okay. Just check out what we did. So I get a call from Expedition Bigfoot, another popular television show, saying, hey, we're gonna go to the Patterson-Gimlin film site. I'm like, Patterson-Gimlin film site? Oh, that, oh, sure, everybody knows this. I didn't know it was called the Patterson-Gimlin film. As soon as they said that this is the second most watched film in history, I'm in. Great story that everybody knows. I'm in. I don't care what you want to do. How can I help? Well, no, that's what we want to know from you. Do you have any ideas? And I remember something I had learned at Autodesk years ago called perspective matching. And I asked, what if I could tell you how tall that critter is? And they went berserk. You could do that? What, for real? And I said, yeah, it's actually not that hard. Just one key requirement. When we go to the site, there has to be items still existing at the site that are in the film, or it won't work. A couple weeks go by, there it is. We deploy, we go to the site. In the TV biz, they call it a fixer. The fixer is the local guy who knows the PG film site like the back of his hand. He knows where every stump is, he knows where everything is. Excuse me. And he pointed out all the stuff in the film that's still there, told me where it was. I surveyed, because that's where I come from, right? RTK GPS survey, points of all the existing stuff that's still there, that was in the film, and scanned it. And then did a cross-section, basically just, a vertical cross-section, remove the tops of all the trees, match up the points, and I'll never forget when I saw the results. 6'3". And my first reaction was, the Bigfoot demographic is going to kill me. Because that points to a man in a monkey suit, right? I'm going to be killed. Because these are passionate people. Thank God. One of the cast members, PhD primatologist, she said, hang on a second. Everybody knows that the Bigfoot people know that the critter in the film, known as Patty, is female. If you watch the film, she's clearly female, okay? I'll just leave it at that. And she said, in all the great ape species, the females are exponent, smaller height, width, weight, whatever, than the males. Run that math to a 6'3" female, hey, the male would be 7.5, 8 feet tall. Booyah. The producers go bananas, everybody's happy. I don't get killed by the Bigfoot people. And all kidding aside, this is the coolest forensic gig I've ever had, right? Talk about a crime scene, 60 years old, that only, an 8mm film exists of. And now we've got measurable geometry for everything in that film. What's the, distance of Patty's humerus or ulna, or forgive me, I don't know my anatomy, but all of that becomes possible. Length of her stride, blah, 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 blah. One of the coolest career highlights for me. Here's another one that Jay mentioned. Alcatraz. Great story. You can say Alcatraz to anybody on planet Earth, like Easter Island and Bigfoot, they're already with you, right? It's cheating, right? Well, this came about because I've got a long history with the National Park Service, because they're rich in great stories. That's why. I've worked in a ton of parks. I was looking for another park to work in and trying to curb my enthusiasm. Hey, let's do the Grand Canyon. Well, it's too big. I want to do it, I'd love to do it, but the scale is just sort of overwhelming. Alcatraz, it's only 23 acres. I could fly that in an hour, and then fly it again with another sensor in another hour. This is totally manageable. It's a great story. All we need is a need. We need permission and access. So I went to the parks. I said, hey, what are you, what's troubling you right now? What are you working on? And they said, we're worried about sea level rise. We're an island. We've got erosional problems all the way around the perimeter of this island. Can you help us figure that out? I click into autopilot. Tell me about your existing digital assets. Digital what? I want a map model of the whole island, inside and out. And they said, okay, huzzah. So now I need a great team, and we're gonna have to innovate. We're gonna have to figure out how to pull this off. So it was really cool. So I'm going to take you through some of this and show you all the data. But first, in case you're not an Alcatraz historian, and this is relevant based on some of the stuff you'll see in the data, this is the first known photograph of the island. There's nothing on it. It's just a round lump of rock out in San Francisco Bay. A few years later, now that the gold rush has gone bananas and San Francisco Bay has become key importance, not only economically but strategically, because the Civil War is about to kick off as well. The Army has taken over the island and completely made a fortress out of it. It's ringed in guns and cannons. The big rectangular building up top, that is known as the Citadel. That's pretty much the castle keep. It's where all the troops stayed for the most part, but it also had a moat, rifle slits, it's completely defensible, classic sort of Napoleonic architecture, engineering. Here is a 2D map, of course, of that era with the Citadel right in the middle. Now I point that out because the Citadel was scraped and they built the cell house, the modern cell house of the penitentiary on top of it. But the basement / dungeon still exists, and you can get down in there. It's pretty slick. Has anybody been down there? No? Yeah. You can pay some extra bucks when you're on Alcatraz at the Park Service, and they'll take you down there. It's worth it. It's pretty cool. And then the Alcatraz, most people are familiar with the modern penitentiary that opened in 1910 as sort of the world's first supermax. Where do we put the worst of the bad guys? To include these guys. Top right, Al Capone. Legendary gangster, right? But at Alcatraz, he was a drooling, mumbling, in the tertiary stages of syphilis, he was he was pretty harmless. He was in the infirmary his whole time he was there. Robert Stroud, Birdman at Alcatraz. Machine Gun Kelly. Who gets to take a mugshot wearing a fedora? And I'm serious. When I found that, what? Anyway, I mean, it's interesting. Doc Barker, he met his end on Alcatraz in an escape attempt. The place where he got shot and killed is called Barker Beach. And then this guy, a few people know, that's Whitey Bulger. He actually did time on a rock. Almost done with history lesson. 1946, there's this crazy event. It's known as the Battle of Alcatraz, where there was a prison riot. Prisoners took over the cell house, but they couldn't get out. They had a great plan, but they screwed up. The keys that they had wouldn't let them out of the cell house. They're in there stuck with guns, with guards. They killed a bunch of guards. It was not pretty. And the governor calls in the Marines, who are just back from Okinawa, because see, this is 46. So World War II has just ended. So the Marines come in and they're mortaring rocket-propelled grenades, machine gun fire, trying to put down this riot, and there's evidence of that, if you know where to look, in and around the cell house on Alcatraz. And then these three guys, the Anglin brothers and Frank Morris, made famous in more than a few movies about being the only three guys to get off Alcatraz. Did they escape? Did they get off the island? Yep. Did they live? Nobody knows. Nobody knows. Again, it's too bad the FBI is in here, because one of the first calls I made was when this project was done, is I just sent a blind email to the U.S. Marshal Service, who were in charge of finding fugitives. And I said, hey, I got millimeter data of the entire island, if that'll help. Because it was an open case. The FBI is closed, but Marshals is still open. Anyway, I never got an answer. So then I had to put on my logistical hat. How am I going to pull this off? I have 3 weeks to do this. My first concern was it's an island and the only way out there and back is on the ferry. First ferry is about 8:30 in the morning, the last one off is like 4:30 in the afternoon, and there's no way I can get this done if I have to rely on the ferries. So I went to the Park Service and I said, is there any way we can stay on the island? And they said, yeah, but you'll have to stay in cells. I'll never forget it. It's one of those moments where I like to think that my poker face was solid, right? But inside I was dying. I'm like, okay, that sounds great. Yeah, well, we can do that. So anyway, we stayed for 3 weeks in D Block, third tier. D Block, again, you know, Alcatraz is where the worst of the worst at Alcatraz were put. This is the whole, these are the solitary confinement cells. So I was up there in cell 31, 9 cells down, 10 cells down. Cell 41 was the Birdman's. It was pretty cool. I just thought that was, wow. So, was that cool? Was that fun? You bet it was. It's one of the greatest things ever. Especially when the Park Service told me about the time we were done, it's like, you know, you all have probably spent more time on the island consecutively than anybody else since the prison closed in '63. We're like, cool. Sounds like another tattoo, I figured out. So the first thing we did, anybody know? Survey Control Network. Remember, I'm a geospatial guy. I could create the most beautiful data of Alcatraz you've ever seen, but if it's not tied to the ground with a high degree of precision and accuracy, so what? So what? That's why Leica's in the house. They know this. They're really good at it. Okay, so we established a survey control network. First thing, we set up, I think there were 72 points. It's my buddy John Tachi with PCL from right here in LA, volunteers on the project. He set up the survey control network and just killed it. Because when he was done with the math, we got 6 millimeters of accuracy, precision across the network. Mm-hmm. I'm going to beat that horse just a little bit. There's a term, if you haven't heard it before, it is key in our industry, change detection. Meaning, this data set, as long as all the other ones you've seen are a moment in time that will last forever, that all subsequent surveys can be measured against to quantify change. That is incredibly valuable. And people like me make a good living providing that service. What has changed on Alcatraz between Survey 1 and Survey 2? And how much? Change detection. It's your friend. There's gold in them our hills, okay? But you need ground control to make this happen. By the way, with these points, we set up GCPs, ground control points. You know, I don't want to take anything for granted. You folks are probably like, oh yeah, I know all that. Cool, but for the folks who don't. Set up targets that are visible from the air, visible for the SLAM and terrestrial scanners as well. That's how we tie it all together. Oh, and the photogrammetry and the multispectral. We flew some drones. That is an inspired flight 1200A, flying a Phoenix LiDAR Ranger 120 sensor. We conducted all the drone ops from the roof of the cell house because Alcatraz doesn't close. And it can't close. There are 7,000 tourists down here. So for those of you 107s, FAA certified Part 107s, flying over people, blah, 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 got to be really, really careful, really, really smart. I don't want to go to jail. I like what I do, but not that much. Okay, so we had to get all the permits and waivers and permissions and whatever. The point was to flight ops, conducting them from the cell house made the most sense because it kept everybody safe. I believe I saw, yeah. This is the E3, Elios 3 from a company called Flyability. And Jay's got one right down there in the corner. We sent this thing into the worst places. It's got LiDAR on it. It's got a 4K camera on it. It's got its own light source. There's LiDAR. Okay. This is down in the Citadel. This is in the dungeon. That is about a 170-year-old sewer. We sent it in there. It was so cool. We sent it up the smokestack. This is a FreeFly Astro, and that's the hover map from Emesent. It's a SLAM scanner. They handed me the keys to Alcatraz, and the 5 of us are the only ones on the island. We're going to fly indoors. Hell yes. Not only because it's cool and because I want to, but can you imagine the occlusions from all these bars? If you know LiDAR, all the shadowing, it would have been a nightmare, right? Well, to get, right, LiDAR line of sight, it just made sense. Yeah, we went into every single cell with the SLAM scanner, of course, but this was our assurance that we got everything indoors in the cell house. The hover map, pretty much, I don't know how to call it, maybe the gold star in terms of sensors for this project, just because it was the most flexible. So you saw it just flying from the Astro. You can put it on a pole, stick it into holes, whatever you want to do. This was great for what we couldn't get from the air. Again, line of sight, occlusions. This is just filling in gaps in the data. Put it on the back of Spot. This is a great day. We're going to talk about, I'll caution you, using Spot at a tourist attraction site like this is ripe with problems. Because it stops traffic, literally. We had 2,000 people following us, walking this thing up the hill with this out. But why? There are asbestos and lead contamination issues in certain buildings that are way off limits on the island that we couldn't fly in because the rotor wash would just kick that stuff up. Perfect solution with Spot. Perfect. You can walk with this thing. And I guess it's been a little over a year, maybe 18 months, they added RTK, GPS. So if you know SLAM LiDAR, SLAM forever, regardless of sensor, has been plagued by problems of slips and drifts in the data, just because it's mobile, right? You enter mobility into any LiDAR sensor, and you're gonna lose a bit of accuracy, precision. Well, they figured out a way using RTK. Now a bunch of people have, but this, when I first saw this, I was like, I gotta try this, because they were telling me that no more slips, no more drifts. Wow. And it worked. Of course, you have to be outdoors, right? RTK GPS. There is the drone LiDAR by itself. I never get tired of looking at it. And if you haven't worked with a 5 return laser before, you will never want to go back. That's what a 5 return laser will get you. Just amazing. And we flew that in maybe 90 minutes. The rest of the project took what, 3 weeks minus 90 minutes, right? That was where all the effort was. But the drone stuff was astonishing. This is the drone data combined with some of the interiors. And this is where, so here's about a 100-year-old, called a modern building. It's just a simple cross-section through the data. Well, this modern building abuts the original gate to the fortress, to Alcatraz, which is gun ports, drawbridge, almost medieval. And I was thinking, because when you walk through here, every tourist does, nobody looks up. So I thought, let's do a section through this modern building and show them the sign, the original sign to the island. Alcatraz Island, 1857. Cannons on either side, drawbridge, there are big hinges and stuff up here. It's a phrase I love to use. It's what we do in this space. We make the invisible visible. It's where it gets fun. To me, it's like, oh my God, we spent all those hours in the field. Yeah, but look at that. This is where it gets cool. This is where people say, wow. This is where you get that emotional investment, which is you can't put a price on. Then Epic Games leaned in. And this was in my mind's eye before we even started. I was hoping that we would wind up with something like this, right? The eye candy, right? Except it's not just eye candy, because we're talking 6 millimeters of accuracy. This is worth its weight in gold for so many reasons. This is, again, Epic. These are both Unreal Engine and Twin Motion. So what can you do with the reality data? Anything. 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 It's one of the fun parts of my gig is when we're at this phase and the client sort of crosses that gap. You see the light bulb go on and they go, wow, could we use the data to? Yes. Wait, I didn't get it. Could we use the data to? Yes. I literally interrupt people and say, yeah, you can. I don't care what your question is. Could we throw an earthquake at this? Yes. Could we model sea level rise? Yes. Yes. It's the other part if you're a student. This is the right place at the right time. Because you're literally dealing in what I call the ultimate currency, which is reality data. It's when you get to this phase and the client becomes enlightened, right? They go from LiDAR, what's that to? When can you guys come back? That's the good stuff. This is everything. All combined, again, in Nubagon with that sort of X-ray feature. That's a tunnel. Sorry, it went by so fast, but this Civil War era magazine, underground, that's under the yard, that nobody gets to see. That's underground. This is underground, Civil War era. That's the morgue. You'll get a better look at it as we get up close to it. But again, why GCPs? Why a survey control network? So we can tie all this data together to get to here. And I can look a surveyor in the eye and say, brother, sister, 6 millimeters. Okay? There's another magazine coming up over here. Nobody gets to see that. Nobody. They know it's there, but it's all, padlocks and chain doors and nobody's allowed to go in there. And then the Citadel is coming up, which they built the cell house on top of. You can see it right here. A bit of an X-ray of the lighthouse. I mean, it never gets old, to me. It's like I was at a trade show and some malcontent was saying, gosh, I get tired of looking at point clouds on LinkedIn. I'm like, you should shut up. Put every point cloud up on LinkedIn and Facebook and everywhere else. I want to see them all. I don't care what it is. So finally, real down to here. So there's that Civil War era map. And this I just did like 10 days ago, because I always like to try to have something new when I do these presentations. I like to be able to look you all in the eye and say, no one has seen this before, no one has seen this next bit before, which is overlaying cross-sections of all of the data. And a hat tip to Leica, because how did I put all of this data together? Photogrammetry, SLAM, drone, TLS, everything. Cyclone 3DR. It literally saved the project, quite frankly. So, to my friends at Leica, I thank you, seriously. Anyway, in 3DR, I cut some sections through the data and then overlaid it on this map, because I wanted to know, does the actual Civil War stuff in the scans match what's on this 1867 map? It does. This looks like an old blueprint. These are the point clouds. Okay? There's the one magazine. This is the yard. There's the morgue. There's the other magazine. The Citadel. This is scan data. And then building 64, this is, you didn't get a really good look at this. This is, if you've been to Alcatraz and you get off the boat, there's this big, huge yellow building right in front of you. That's building 64. Essentially the barracks where the guards and their families lived full-time. Well, it's built on top of some enormous gun batteries, which are now all National Park Service offices. And in each one of these spaces was a huge cannon. And then back here, to keep them safe, is ammunition, gunpowder, and so on. But it's all been repurposed as office space. And it all lined up. And of course, if it isn't obvious, I love what I do. When I saw this, I'm like, that is cool. Because it lined up like it's supposed to. So, I'll leave you with a couple of thoughts. Name me a medium that provides context better than reality capture. You can't. You can't. Not since the photograph. Think about it. Think about it. And how do you put a price on context? I can't. Understanding that emotional investment, we all know that data is king. I suggest and believe that of all the data types there are, reality data is the most valuable, and that's why. One other thought, if you're coming up, thinking about getting into the space, you're a student, I forget the exact number, but less than 10% of the physical world has been digitized. What's crazy is that was even true 20 years ago. That's where I first heard that statistic. Went back, like to make sure I'm not espousing nonsense. It hasn't changed. There's a world of opportunity out there, right? In the old days, we called it BC, meaning before CAD. All right? There's a lot of stuff out there, whether it's, the built environment or the natural environment. It is a target-rich environment, that's for sure. So I'll leave you with a line I stole from a friend of mine many years ago, which I firmly believe in. Let's find a way to work together and get in trouble together. Thanks very much.
Well, let's give another applause. Thanks for that. So we'll take a little break for you guys, stretch your legs, talk to Wingtra, talk to Leica, talk to Esri, talk to Kuku Reckon. I always say that wrong. Kuku Reckon. And come back here, and next presentation we'll have in like about 10 minutes, Doreen Masala and Phi Win from SoCal Edison will be talking about how they utilize LiDAR for asset and vegetation management.
Sure, it was excellent presentation. Thank you so much. Appreciate it. I'm Ryan Rizzo. I want to hear Eric now also.
Yeah, I think we both share that same vision of what we want to do. So to see it, I know, I'm here too, so it's like, I can kind of remember like the hallway with the robot dog, like I have a photo of her.
I mean, he's just a beast in there. So, I mean, if you ever have a problem you can't solve, I bet he would probably be able to let it handle. But you are talking to the right person to talk about stuff. I mean, like, Eric's good, but yeah, he knows where the bodies are very. But thank you was awesome. See, and I'm a big fan about
But then it does not work. Right? But Makes sense.
Right. We got you there. Right. You guys know where it is right there.
So bad. But it was very you should go through that. Get his car. Then you're going on 2 projects overseas. My kids are cycle. It's all about time.
Honestly, it's weird.
Never thought about that. But look,
we've been hearing a lot about this. Like our guys.
thank you so much. We're all here. Thank you.
Yeah, when did I forward that to you?
We do a lot of good points.
We're just talking.
Different areas.
Ready? 4 years. 4 years, right? 5. 20. Other than some Zoom calls.
So when you're
I'm wondering how we can
Part of the problem we have is since we are the way to areas that are areas like those, it's not just don't want to take time. Or they can see there's a lot of so you have to bring in that stuff. Pharaoh's already there. Right. So we need to do
get the water bottle.
it was early on.
Get the water bottle.
How it started. I know some people. And so when I was a kid,
Go.
sounds ridiculous. So I just forget it until all that went over. So I started planning, and that's how I did it. And it was a little bit so that's kind of why it's in there.
Especially since we're going to be flying for
We're talking about all of a sudden it's just like you can hear how happy it is. I hear those 5 years, 4 years later, all on the borders and things like that.
Here, I'll tell you this right now.
Some same story. Which one? No.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Versus going, no, I mean, but versus going from C.
Oh, yeah.
It's difficult. Because you're, it's not even like you're going
So these guys are using
geopolitical you know, when we go places that use the fire which is different. Which, you know, so what I love to just look at results. Oh, me? That's what I'm saying. No, all that stuff's on my own. Which is interesting. They were all we don't want to and when you come back, then we can use it to promote. Because they're willing to. They didn't want to sponsor it, but yet they were going to use it for lower the I probably could have, like, it was crazy. But then again, I didn't try to. Because they sort of put it up. But it's all about the way that this works. It looks like you could, I mean, my phone grew. It is here. If you look down here, they're all on their own. Yeah, trust. And then I went the first year, I took like 4 or 5 years.
You want that set up?
Some we did well. So I never left home. And I learned a lot about students' irresponsibility. It's Ryan. You know, 60 weeks. About 3 weeks in, I was it's tough, right? It's so different.
So I have that all came out of the student. It's hard to say what we can do with that. But I don't know. We can just lean in. There's a lot of vegetation that has to go in Thailand for geology. It's a little bit I've been there twice too.
And you tend to not country until you
You want to keep it up?
yeah.
Probably, I would say I would.
because these devices are really like magical devices.
Yeah, it's a tough thing.
I appreciate it. I don't want to do this.
Oh yeah, that's right.
It's some type of collaboration.
A lot of iPhones came out.
Yeah, that's right.
I don't. Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, the amounts. You can definitely see one. I don't know something you want to how much. I think there's some versions of this. Question is, I don't know how do you want to, even like the twin motion, which is the replicator, that's free. Like, what's the benefit? This is mine. What's the benefit to you personally? And what's the benefit to the school? And what parameters is the school going to?
I didn't, I only knew all that because so doing it.
And then half the time, people
It was very advanced.
I because of the thing we just talked about.
We have our own software.
Right? This is the sweet spot. So you have to balance those things and decide. I mean, it's just, I mean,
It's not being developed.
and I haven't figured it out. I don't know.
So it's limited by
I was on NSF research. That's when I came to read. It takes there's like an exchange.
See, that's cool. You can tell. That's what and there is. It is. The outside brands are not factored.
Oh, yeah. Sir, it was awesome to meet you. Appreciate you very much. I'm the easternmost bound, and we got a little further east, but I'm the east.
Oh,
But that's, yeah, I'm KC area. Yeah, absolutely. Take care. Did you stay in our meeting? Oh, wow, that's amazing.
I would love to courses, but I feel like I already have the career. I mean, I'm sure there's actually like advanced application. Everything on the middle way is not enough to teach it.
I'm still a paper guy. You can download it at home.
All right, just a couple more minutes. They're bringing lunch in and setting stuff up, so we'll let them kind of set up. We'll get going in a couple minutes. Lunch is a little early, so we're not breaking for lunch yet, but just gonna get them set up.
So, just something to keep in mind also. Texture match photos, digital SLR, in 3D, so you can take your photos, your high quality, you can do HDR, all work, whatever you want to do.
Yeah. I think when I saw Fullerton, I was like, it's just me. Is that what it's cool like that?
I've seen it
In general, I just never see it.
a lot of stuff in Texas.
Yes, I didn't know about it, so I saw that.
I told them about that. How many people you have in your program?
I have, let's see, so in geology and geotech. Right now, we have
I'm just wondering because it's a shrinking industry. So it's, the more we get the young people in, the better. Now we did have, I'm out of Utah. I service Idaho down to Utah, Montana. That's my territory. And I asked people, I did take here's good news yesterday. The local union here has a lot of survey surveys.
Yeah.
And you guys, these guys have
Class salads are
it's kind of coming back around.
Yeah, and so I'm not a hill, but I'm not staff. We have
the spring of 30
Yeah, it's good. I mean, it's a good
I was, but then I wanted to do the GIS stuff, so I figured I got what I needed, and because I would have to do those aero classes, they would just put me in my
Yeah, we have later back.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Exactly. Bring it down. Yeah. No. But I mean, now, I mean, in the survey, I'm licensed in 5 different states. So in the survey, I was up against the problem was people that were paying didn't have the capability of using they're out of here. We have to but once they get them in, all they want to
Budget, current budget.
and every job that we get, come up on that. And you have the data there, so you don't have to send it back out. It's not going to move because it's tied 6 millimeters. It's tied to the terrestrial. So it's not what you have.
So according to the data, like the data collection is the most important. This is where take too much time.
Because we have such universities out here that are teaching, and there's nothing like it. And part of it, but here they don't have that. They don't have the water.
I love what you said about it.
Excellent presentation. I'd love to have that. I'd love to have that out
Okay, we'll get going again. Now everybody had a chance to kind of stretch the legs, get some snacks. Like I said, lunch is being delivered, but it's just early. Did we lose it? Okay, we're good. Very sensitive up here. They just rewired this whole room, and they're very excited about the new technology, but it's just super sensitive right now. So, but okay, so we'll go ahead and get started with our next presentation. So this is Pete Wynn from SoCal Edison to talk about their use cases for vegetation and asset management. Here you go.
Hi everyone, thanks for all attending. This should be a pretty interesting segue how we use LiDAR within our utility vegetation management. I'll answer all the questions, because I'll admit, when I first started vegetation management back in, I think, 2018, I didn't know anything. What is vegetation management within SCE, and how do we use, and once I found out what it was, it's literally in the word, utility vegetation management, and why are trees a risk, why are vegetation points a risk underneath our infrastructure. So I'll explain what that looks like. I'll actually start with what kind of stemmed the need for the creation of vegetation management and LiDAR. And so back in 2003, August 14, the summer, we had the Northeast blackout. And if you look at this picture here, this is the region that it affected. And the Northeast blackout was very severe. Basically, it was a blackout where we didn't have any power for a duration of time. And so it affected 45 million people in the US, 10 million people in Canada, and the event contributed to 11 deaths and cost about $6 billion, $6 billion, not millions, $1 billion, and so of damages. So you'll wonder why, how does a blackout cause death? Power is very important in our infrastructure, right? If we don't have power, we can run across people that have cardiac or like a CPAP machine, or have dependencies on electricity. If there's no backup power, it can cause a very quick death, right? And so it's important to understand power is really important. If you don't have it, obviously, it's not just the lights in your room, it's actually your peers' health, or your neighbors that are depending on electricity. So next up, so this is the sequence of the Northeast blackout. It is really important to understand that all it took was one tree. One tree created a cascade of events that was irreversible. So I'll start at kind of a lot of words here to read this to you, but if you focus on the timeline, at 1:31, we had the East Lake, Ohio generating plant shut down abruptly. This plant is owned by First Energy. At 2:02, which is the next timeline over, the transmission line fails, pretty much about 30 minutes after. And so the 345 kV overhead transmission lines, which is a very heavy line in northeast Ohio, fails due to overloaded lines sagging, making contact with the tree and wall hills. And so really important to note that transmission lines, they have a long span. You can have basically 5 football fields of a length, 500 yards well, actually, it's a little bit more than 100 yards for each football field, but you can basically have 5 football lengths of span per, that's just like the average. There's some even longer spans. So when you drive on the freeway, you can sometimes see your transmission runaways. Those lines can span a long distance. And so they carry a lot of weight, and there's a lot of things that contribute towards what causes the line to sag. And first thing you note here, at 2:02, the overhead transmission line fails due to overloaded lines. Overloaded lines, basically what that means is there's a surge of power that caused the lines to overload. So basically sending a bunch of power, and it caused the lines to heat and then sag, right? Does everyone follow me? It's like a hot piece of cheese. You start to see it sag. That's what happens when we energize things, right? So just a quick show of hands. Does anyone own an EV vehicle? Or know of anyone who owns an EV vehicle? Parents? So basically, when you have an EV vehicle, let's say in your house, you have a conductor that's going, let's say you have an electric charger in your house, charging your vehicle. You have a conductor that carries electricity from the panel or the circuit breaker to your charger to your vehicle, right? So that conductor, depending on the gauge of the wire, it heats up. And so there's rated wires, so this one here is rated for 345. The power was so much, there was so much load that it caused the line to sag significantly, touching a tree that basically, let's say, you have a large span, you have a tree that's 40 feet away from a transmission line. That line sag and touch the vegetation, which caused a cascade of events, which I'll go over next. So at 3:05 p.m., which is about an hour after this event, another transmission line known as the Chamberlain Harding line sags into a tree and trips the Parma south of Cleveland. And then after that, about 30 minutes later, the power shifted by the first failure onto another. A cascade of events caused another line to trip and cause sag. And then at this point here, I've already described 3 events where the lines sagged, and there's no wind events at this point, right? August 14th, the summer, it's kind of like, there was no wind report during this time. It caused the lines just to purely sag from overloaded, over-engineered, well, not engineered, but failure of the lines past engineering specs, right? And so at 4:13, the end of the cascading failure, 256 power plants are offline, 85% of which went offline after the grid separation occurred. So most of the action of an automatic protective control. So you had a bunch of power supplies that shut down in an event, due to the event of this. So basically, if you kind of measure here, 1:31 when this all started, within just a bare, I think 3.5 hours, not even that, a little over 3 hours, you had a significant event. And so the Northeast blackout resulted, and so I mentioned, a lot of money was involved in the damages, lives were lost, and that's all it took, right? And so another contributor to blackouts and why they're sort of severe is when people start depending on generators, they put them in their garage, and the longer you run that generator, what do you get? It's gas powered, right? You get carbon monoxide poisoning. And so that was a major contributor to those deaths that occurred. I know it's like common sense, but when you run a generator, you don't expect to run it for that long. You kind of expect the power's gonna run eventually, and it didn't. And then people had carbon monoxide leaking in from the garage or wherever into their homes. And so I feel like that's a good touchy grabber. Did I get your attention? Okay, I'm glad. So as a result, the Northeast blackout, which it led to the creation of a bunch of policies, and there's a lot of words here, but I'm going to dumb it down for you. The NERC and FERC, this is the first one here. Basically, the NERC, which stands for the North American Electric Reliability Commission, and FERC, which is the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. These two entities were created. The Federal Energy Commission basically creates a policy. They get together, a commission, they create a policy, and then NERC enforces it. Basically, think of it in the word NERC is the enforcer, right? And so they work together basically not only keep the lights on, but in NERC, what it means is the North American Electric Reliability Commission, it enforces reliability and safety of our lines. And so when a policy is created, there needs to be enforcement, right, for it to be effective. And so as a result, they created what's called the FAC 003. This is basically a defense in-depth approach to improve reliability of the electric transmission system. And by doing a lot of it, basically the main thing is ensuring that we don't have trees that are within a minimum vegetation clearance distance. You'll hear me say this a lot. MVCD, in our world, we call them P1s, right? Priority ones, which means that a tree is at its bare minimum clearance from or getting so close to the line, it's beyond the point of it can cause catastrophic damage, right? So it's too close to the line, it's beyond comfort, and we need to mitigate it, right? And so they created this MVCD, requiring documentations of the maintenance strategies of our infrastructure, procedures and processes and specifications, used to manage vegetation to prevent potential flashover conditions, including consideration of 1, conductor dynamics, and 2, the interrelationship between vegetation growth rates and the control methods of the inspection frequency. So what does that all mean? It basically means that the conductor dynamics goes into the engineering, right? Because if I drive by a transmission line and I see this transmission line is it's just far away from this tree, right? I don't think it could be a risk, but I'm not factoring in the dynamics of that conductor, right? What is that line rated for? What is that line, if I have max load, what does that line look like when I leave, right? Let's say it's summertime, super hot, everyone's running their AC, like August 14th, everyone's running their AC, and that line starts to sag. And with sag, and wind, you have sway and swag, right? So it's looking beyond at inspection, it's looking beyond what you see. And so that's what these requirements were enforced to ensure that we manage our vegetation effectively, to ensure safety and reliable power. The penalties that were created by the FERC is if any tree is encroaching within the MVCD, it's $1 million per day fine per tree. So let's say, again, you have to think of it like we have so much lines in California. Does anyone know what Southern California Edison covers? I didn't know this until I worked in the actual field. But we cover from, does anyone know where Yosemite, everyone knows where Yosemite is, right? We're basically right outside of Tioga Pass, and we cover everything from Tioga Pass, which is like, all the way Mammoth, beyond Mammoth, and all the way down to the border of Arizona and Nevada. So we have a very large footprint. It's not as large as the other utilities, but I consider it pretty large. And so what does that look like? That means a lot of vegetation, right? It can be, let's go into a forest. Go to the forest and just look at just maybe, a mile worth of trees. If you were to count how many trees in a mile of just plain sight, if you could see 1 mile ahead, that's a lot of trees, right? And multiply that by 50 or 60,000 miles, I think, is what we have on the system. And so it's a lot of trees to manage, a lot of risk. Having a penalty, let's say we have about, I think, 1.2 million trees in the inventory. If we were charged, let's say, 10% of that, $1 million per day per tree is significant. So this really enforces utilities, like Southern California and other utilities, to take it seriously. It's going to hit you in the money. It's going to hit you where it hurts, right? Money, bank, right in the bank, right? And so beyond that, we look at risk from just obviously it affects people's lives. And so understanding the line dynamics, like I mentioned, it requires LiDAR and PLS CAD modeling. PLS is very simple. It's power line systems. I almost forgot. Too simple, but it's power line systems, and it basically, like I mentioned, you look at the conductor and what is it rated for, right? Let's say you have in your home, right? Let's say 2-gauge wire to power up an 80 amp charger for that electric vehicle, right? That is rated for, I think, 260 degrees Fahrenheit of maximum loads. If I had full-on 80 amps running through there, that's what that line is rated for. Beyond, and then it starts to melt and become a hazard, right? And so, understanding the engineering specs of a conductor really, it's not as simple as just going in the field and saying, hey, this tree is, I remember when I was in the field, customers would always tell me, like, hey, this tree is really far from the transmission line. Why do I need to trim it? And explaining that, hey, if this tree, if this line was under maximum load, it's going to look a lot lower than when I'm inspecting it now. So what's really important is we want to mitigate the risk before it becomes a problem, right? If you're telling me this tree is now touching, I didn't do my job, right? I'm telling you way in advance that the tree is going to become a problem. We either need to remove it, trim it, or just get enough clearance to where we have safe distance between the line and our vegetation. That's basically the creation of vegetation management. That's kind of in one-line sentence. What is vegetation management? We're managing vegetation to ensure we have safe distances from our line to our trees and bushes, whatever vegetation that exists. And then once a tree is identified in LiDAR, we have to make sure the clock is ticking, right? We have to make sure that we mitigate within a reasonable time frame. With LiDAR, it's really useful because we can see we can see very accurately beyond what the eye can see, right? If I were to, I think, I'm gonna ask for volunteers later, and I think I got 3 volunteers already, but one more if anyone wants to join. But that's gonna go to the next, a few slides from now. So the next question is, what if WEC had a cascading blackout? So I showed you guys the Northeast blackout, which affected Canada and the eastern part of America, right? And so on this side, over on the west side, right, the WEC stands for Western Electricity Coordinating Council. It is geographically the largest and most diverse of the 6 regional entities. So when I talk about NERC, I talk about areas on the east side. This is considered one of the largest, actually I think it is the largest entity that we have that's dealt with that we have to deal with the delegated authority with from NERC and FERC. And so this area kind of spans pretty much in a nutshell from Canada, literally part of Canada, down to Mexico, right? So that's part of Canada up there, and then California, Oregon, Washington, and then all across along the borders of these other states, right? And so it's very large, and so what if WAC were to have a blackout? I mean, think about it. That's a lot of states. That's a lot of states. And when I showed you that previous, just quickly go back, that's a very small portion compared to the WAC, right? So with that said, we're part of WAC, as well as PG&E and other utilities that are on the west side. It is fairly large. We had $6 billion worth of damage. We had 11 deaths, which is a small area. I consider that pretty small compared to the WAC, right? And so if we were to have a blackout on the WAC, within WAC on our side, I would say probably triple, quadruple, or I don't know how, I'm trying to think of a concept here, but it's going to be enormous. The damage and the volume, I hope no deaths, but if we were to have a blackout, it would affect a lot of people, a lot more people than what we had in 2003. I'm going to play a video really quick. Let me see. I don't think we have audio, but this is an example of what a tree looks like when it comes into contact with the line. Be prepared. This is pretty cool. I think I showed this to customers, and then right away they're like, "Oh, you're right." But I don't want to have to show this because some people understand right away. Oh yeah, we understand risk, they're reasonable. But once they see in actuality, this tree here, a pretty common tree around Fullerton. You see this often. I think when I pull into the parking lot. That's a carrotwood tree. So you ever go out to your front yard and you step on something on barefoot and you're like, oh crap, that hurts so bad, and maybe use other words, but you hurt your foot really bad. That's called a carrotwood box, right? It's those little things that have orange inside. You know what I'm talking about? And it opens up 3 ways. That's called a carrotwood box. It comes from these trees here. So those trees fairly slow grower. I think maybe it grows maybe 3 feet an annual cycle. So every 12 months it goes 3 feet. You don't really need to trim much on it, but this is an example of a tree that got way too close and it caused, you can see here in that photo, at the very top, that's a distribution line, which is not even that much voltage. It's about 12 kV or 16 kV sometimes. I mean, this is not our utility, but 12 to 16 kV versus our transmission 500 kV, right? A lot more power. And so this distribution, you can see in this span here, if I were to take a guess, that pole to the end of the other pole, I would probably say maybe 50 feet. How many cars is that? I'd say 12 cars. So it's not even that long of a span, and you can see how much sag there is. This is during probably the summertime, I would assume, because of the sun, the way it looks just hot, and the grass being all yellow. And so in the summertime, you can see how much a distribution line with very low voltage compared to transmission sagged that much, and it touched this tree. And I think whoever looked at this tree probably said, hey, it's a slow grower, and that line, the distribution span, it's not going to sag that much. And so, as a fair of neglect, they just didn't sign it up for trim in this utility, right? And so, as a result, this is what happened. I don't know if I have sound, but if I do, good. Oh, here we go. I'm gonna play it again. Sorry. It's an anticlimactic here. I'm showing you guys the end result.
Is it opening the screen?
Yeah, it's opening here.
Is it my?
All right, ready? Is this playing? Okay.
Let's see.
Oh, it's opening on the screen. You're right. Maybe I go out of presentation mode. Yeah, in the slideshow. All right, ready? I'm gonna read that part because he says some things that I think are very creative. But as you can see, I won't play it again because it's so dramatic, but that is a very common thing in utility where we have trees that get too close to the lines And you can see in that video, the tree was never even touching the line. It got very close. So that I'm going over it again, that photo. So if you look here, this is actually a comm line. So that line that's going right through the tree, that's the comm line. So what that means, that's the communication line. It has no voltage. It has a very low, I think like, you can touch it with bare hand, right? It's the line that's basically the same voltage that you would get from touching, like, if you have, no one has cable anymore, but DirecTV, right? That comm line, that's the comm line, right? For communications, for talking on the phone, or internet, spectrum, right? And so that line right there is what you see going through the, and that's okay, you know, as long as there's no risk there. But you can see the sag of that distribution got close enough to where it caused, you heard it all. You heard arcing, right? You saw it with your eyes, and then you have flashing, which you had the fire, right? When you have arcing, you have flashing pretty much followed after, and it creates a lot of heat very fast. And you can see he stood there and he knew, it was instant. It's like, oh, this tree is starting to flash, and he's not, obviously, he's just a neighbor, and he started to step back, and good thing he did, because you can see what happened there, right? Boom, right? And so how that happens is anything that's grounded, right? Electricity is very simple. Anything that's grounded, if you touch anything that's energized, you basically are the pathway between the ground and the power source, right? You can see birds can go up there and they're fine because they're not grounded. If we go up there, we touch, instead we touch on the ground, we touch the line, or we put our hands together, we cause what's called crossfades, right? And that's just an example of what a ground to conductor can cause, arcing, flashing, fires, and so forth. And that tree, like I mentioned, it's got a lot of vegetation. It probably started, you know, and luckily it wasn't too close to other trees. If you couple this with a dry ponderosa pine, for example, anyone familiar with their pine species? Ponderosa pine is that tree that you see Sequoia National Park, sequoias too as well, very similar. These are very slow growers, but you can see in the wintertime, or close to fall, they start to turn orange, right? And then the leaves fall and become dry. If you couple that same tree with this, imagine if I had a pine tree that was dry. Anyone like going camping, for example? What do you light up when you go camping? You're lighting up pine trees, right? They light up fast, especially the pine needles that are dried out, orange. They light up very fast, and you have potential for very rapid fire. And so, again, mesh is very common in the utility. I'm not talking just about electricity. I'm talking about water. I'm talking about gas. Let's say you have a tree root that is growing in the soil, and there's a gas line that's running through. That tree root is going to eventually break that line, right, and split it, because tree roots, they move very slow, but they're stubborn. They're not gonna, you know, move out of the way. They're gonna go through what they need to and basically destroy that pipe. And so we have these issues not only with electricity or electric utilities, we have it with all utilities. And water, for example, a main, everyone's seen a water main burst, right? That's an example of vegetation that failed. All right, next up. So now I'm going to couple what is LiDAR. Everyone knows what LiDAR is, but I'm going to give you a very simple sentence. It's a remote sensing method that uses pulsed lasers or focus light to measure distance between objects on Earth, on bare Earth, right? So the LiDAR pulse is combined with other data recorded by airborne system, or even now we have LiDAR within vehicles, right? That are mounted directly onto a truck. It can capture LiDAR very effectively from the ground without ground surveys or other pieces that you need to get this accurate data. And so what that does, once you capture all that data, you can see it in the photo. This is a 3D image. I like to think of LiDAR as a paintbrush, right? It gives you a full-blown 3D image that's painted very well. You can see our infrastructure here, and what is represented in red, obviously, is risk. It's trees that are getting too close or basically contacting. And so we have methods in determining a true positive and a false positive. And so again, it's like a paintbrush, and it basically draws in three-dimensional picture what things look like along our infrastructure. We use it in vegetation management, which I'll describe what it is next. Maybe I missed anything else. I also want to point out that this data is coupled with our inspection, which consists of arborists, it consists of non-arborists, like just standard people that are doing inspections for identifying vegetation risk. And so it's coupled with both the human element, and also it's a fine like concrete data set, right? Where you know what is a certain clearance, you're not guessing. And then with that LiDAR, we use these data point clouds, what LiDAR can generate, to be put into models. Like I mentioned, the PLS CAD model, the power line system, right? Very simple, power line system CAD model. And it creates, what I mentioned in the beginning, it creates a model that you can't see with your eye, right? It factors in line loading, it factors in max sag and sway conditions. And so without guessing, right, because no one can guess. I can't go in the field and tell you that line's gonna sag about 20 feet and sway 30 feet. No matter my experience, I'm not gonna be able to tell you with certainty what it looks like. And so we use a LiDAR data to generate these max sag line load models. And so this is the part that I enjoy the most, because we were able to use LiDAR, it takes away the guessing, right? It's really, and with that, without guessing, you have true, an accurate way of identifying risk. Alrighty, next slide, there's not coming. I'm trying not to move the stand so much, because I know that the HDMI cable has a fault. I'm not sure if that, if it goes out, let me know, because I can speak and I'm not sure how to present. So vegetation management, this is a core program with Southern California Edison. Vegetation management exists in a lot of other utilities. It's a mandate. It has to exist because there's trees everywhere. It's here before us. And so vegetation management, again, I mentioned, it is basically a tree clearance standard across the utility, and it's required by law. And the law, I don't like saying the law too much because I sound like an officer, but it's GO95 PRC 4293. That's the law. If you look it up in Google, it tells you what the law is. The law, again, it has a table. I'll go over that next. But it's a law, you know. And so some people say, you're not going to cut my tree. You're not going to mitigate it. You might have neighbors that do not want the trees maintained. The power lines. Okay, and you have to tell them, remind them, hey, it is a law. I hate saying it. I hate saying that it is a law. You have no choice. But there's a reason why the law was created, right? Was to protect us and the community. And so again, the vegetation management program has 1.6 million trees approximately in inventory that's been captured for the last, I think, we have been capturing inventory since, I don't know, the early 2000s, right? And when the program was a requirement to be created by FERC and NERC, right? And so we have about 1.6 million trees, and of that, we have 50% of the trees are located in high fire risk areas. I have a next slide over that I'm going to show you what the high fire risk areas looks like in California. California is a wildfire state, so we have high fire risk areas for that reason, right? We get wildfire things like this year. How many wildfires do we have? You remember? They all pop up around the same time of the year. Peak wildfire season. That's around summertime, and then all the way through the end of fall. Sometimes it drags into the winter. I think we had the Creek Fire in 2020. That fire dragged on from, I think the beginning was September, Labor Day, and it dragged on all the way through until we had snow. So we can still have wildfire in winter, right? California, the most bipolar weather that I can ever imagine, right? And if you're a meteorologist, you're being paid to lie, And so, anyways, it's a joke, because you can never predict weather, and you're pretty much like a paid liar. And so, anyways, with that, we have high fire risk areas, which I'll share next. Our core programs exist of line clearing. Line clearing is basically tree maintenance, it's trimming trees. And then we're removing trees under line clearance. We have hazard trees. Hazard trees are dead and dying, diseased trees. So think of it like you have a tree that you can trim, and then hazard trees goes beyond. It's like, this tree you can't trim because it's gonna fall, right? It's gonna fail because it's dying. So that's what hazard tree takes care of. And then structure brushing, which is, you have a pole and you have vegetation that's growing around the pole, which is the structure, right? So we trim a radial clearance around the pole as well. So we're taking care of line clearing, which is tree maintenance, trimming, removal of trees, of dead trees or bad trees that are just going on its way out, and then structure brushing, and then last but not least, weed abatement. So we have a lot of weeds that grow underneath our transmission right-of-ways. We don't want fuel to build up underneath our transmission right-of-ways, so you have to think of it like, what if our lines fall, right? Our lines fall, it doesn't matter how close that bush was, that bush is gonna light up. And so that's what weed abatement is. It ensures that we have basically a road underneath our right-of-way. Our right-of-way is basically our transmission. When you drive by on the freeway, you see, whoa, you see a transmission way, you can see it very clearly because it has a defined right-of-way, which is basically a road 30 feet on each side of the line to make sure there's nothing underneath, nothing around, and nothing that can fall on, right? So that's what the vegetation program was created to take care of. Again, the fall-on risk, what would it look like if a tree fell on the tree, a tree fell on the lines, what would it look if there were lines falling on trees, and what would it look like if the tree grew into the line, and then last but not least, structure brushing, what if the pole caught fire due to a brush coming by. And so any questions with the Vegetation Management Core program? That was a lot of words to say. I think I didn't pause for the other slides, but any questions so far? Question?
When the line starts sagging, what is like the remediation? Do you, what's the remediation?
So we know when lines are going to sag. We actually have a model that is dependent on temperature and line loading, right? And we don't even we don't guess. We just go max sag or max load, max temperature, and then that tells us how much that line can potentially sag, how much can that line potentially sway. And so we know where it will go based off of just simple math, right? If the line is 100 feet long, it's got right mid-span is when it's going to sag the lowest, and it's it lags, it sags 20 feet. I'm just throwing numbers out there. 20 feet, and it has the potential to hit everything in this space, right? So we know when the lines what potential could happen when the lines sag and sway, and what we do is we mitigate everything in between before it becomes a problem. So we just clear everything in between before it becomes a problem. So trees that are in that bubble, right? You're still like a not bubble, but yeah, just a bubble. We have everything, a radio clearance to make sure we maintain a distance of, we'll check over next slide, in a few slides. We have a certain distance that we have to maintain within that bubble. So before it becomes a problem, we always take preventative measures. Good question. Question for you?
Do the lines contract, or does it have to get replaced?
The lines do contract, but they don't need to be replaced due to contraction. We do regularly maintain the line itself. There's a different inspection team for that. They use helicopters, they use drones to actually look at the line. LiDAR is being used too as well to determine, okay, that line sagged this much. We know eventually it was under max conditions. We have to replace that line eventually, right? Nothing's gonna last forever. There's required, even like a tramway, for example, that uses a large cable to pull you up a mountain. Those lines need to be replaced eventually too, right? But there's no electricity running through it. So when you incorporate heat and electricity, you start to wear out things. Eventually something needs to be replaced. So eventually we do replace lines. We see helicopters carrying big old towers, because as our technology advances, we do preventative maintenance on our infrastructure.
Also, is the CAD program proprietary, or are you working with a particular software?
Software.
Okay.
Yep. Question. CAD is a really good program that we use. We use it for a lot. So good question. Alrighty. Any other questions? Alrighty. Next slide. So yeah, this is the high fire risk area I talked about. California is a pretty large state, pretty long, and it goes from basically I mentioned high fire risk. This is not our territory. This is what high fire risk looks like. And so we have three tiers. We have tier 1, which means that you're not in high fire risk. We have tier 2, which means that you're in the middle of the 3 tiers, which is you're considered high fire risk. And then tier 3 is in your extreme high fire risk, right? So tier 2 is high fire risk, tier 3 is extreme high fire risk. And so dependent on where our lines are in this space, this represents what we need to do to ensure we don't have a catastrophic event, right? Because risk is measured by these two, many factors, but this is one of the main things that determines what needs to be done, what kind of clearance do we achieve to ensure we don't have a catastrophic event. This is from California's website. Obviously, SCE just makes a copy version of it. It calls it SCE, high fire risk area. But high fire risk, it affects everything. It affects your insurance, right? That's how high fire risk is basically a measurement of home value, the trees in the area, tree density, and the foliage, and the moisture and the leaves. It's a lot of variables. The main thing that drives it is home values and and how much damage they can affect. So you like say, like, hey, why is Sierra National Forest not computing high fire risk? Some of it is where homes are at, right? And so we have controlled burns in the Forest Service. If anyone's ever seen a controlled burn, happens all the time, right? It's areas where there's no homes, right? Not we, but the U.S. Forest Service has controlled fires. So next up, this is basically the law. Like I mentioned, this is the table that represents the PRC 4293 code, the GEO95 rule, and it represents when we have, in this table here, is specifically tied to extreme and very high fire risk areas. So basically tier 3. So these are the clearances that we must obtain, and I'll start with the left with your right side. And so RCD is regulation clearance distance. This means that if trees get to this point at 10 feet, we're in trouble, right? We should never wait till the risk becomes close enough to where we need to respond. We don't ever want to have situations where we are responding responsive action. We don't want to take action when we have to respond. We want to do better. We want to basically have a clearance that's much greater than RCD, which is the bare minimum. If you're beyond that, we're definitely in big trouble. And so RCD is generally 10 feet for most of our conductors. We have transmission, 69 kV is the lowest, and it represents about 4 feet. So if you're looking at the average that you see when you drive around, it's probably around 240 kV or 230 kV. And so that's about 10 feet, and it represents a lot of other voltages, nominal voltages. And so anywhere from 10 feet to 30 feet is our clearance buckets here. And what we want to achieve is right in the middle here. And so this is the trigger distance. This is basically when work should be signed up, right? It's when work, it's 18 feet typically, or 9 feet for the lowest voltage. But let's say we work with 18 feet, we want to ensure that whatever is within 18 feet is being mitigated, because we don't want to allow for that vegetation. Vegetation is living. It can move, it can grow, and so we don't want to get anything less than TCD. Even if greater, if we can get 30 feet, that'd be great. In certain places, we definitely do our best to achieve way more than the bare minimum, right? Which is, I would say, TCD. So 18 feet represents our minimum clearance that we try to achieve, vegetation management. And then beyond that, we don't want to get to that point, right? So that's the clearance for vegetation management for high fire risk areas. We also have non-high fire risk areas that you saw on the map that were not in that colored polygon. And it's a lower clearance. So again, I mentioned RCD is the minimum, and VCD, which you saw in the very beginning, is the minimum vegetation clearance distance. Quick question for the team. This is for the audience here. So I had some volunteers. I had Carlos, I had Chris, and I had, what was your name again? Blake. I just come real quick. I have a question. Just I'm going to ask. I think just 3 volunteers is fine. I'm going to ask you guys, what does 20 feet look like? And the audience is welcome to guess too. So you guys can point your objects. I think I have one from here to this wall. Would you guys say here? Okay, I'll start with you guys. So Blake, what do you think 20 feet looks like?
Might overshoot it from like this wall here to like, I think I'm going way over.
You are.
Yeah.
Let's what about from here to here? Did you say that's about the same distance?
Little under a 6-foot person. Just keep double.
Okay. Would you mind holding this, Blake?
Yeah.
Hold it against the wall. I have a measuring tape. Fine.
Well, that will help me.
Yes. And then Chris, Carlos, what's your guess?
I want to see this first.
Oh, no, you can.
I would say probably from this wall to the door.
Okay. And then what about Carlos?
I'll probably say this wall to the laptop.
The laptop. Okay, all right. Well, here we go. So from here to the wall, which is the first guess. This is saying, what does that say? 21 feet. So you were very close with the first guess. So the laptop, can you pull it to the laptop? So
What part of the laptop?
the edge. Oh yeah, just 1 foot, yeah. Oh yeah. Can you pull it tight? So this represents 222 inches, and if my math is correct, that is about 18.5 feet. So the closest guess was from here to the wall. From here to that wall, I don't think it's the same distance, it definitely looks longer. So just an example, and then, the next guess. What does 15 feet look like? What does 12 feet look like? What does 10 feet look like, right? It's a guessing game. And you can see we had 3 volunteers, and only one was very close, but it wasn't precise. It was 21 feet. So this is what LiDAR does in this. Thank you for the volunteers. Thank you. Give a round of applause. So very simple concept, but that's how we've been doing our vegetation management prior to LiDAR. And so LiDAR can now very accurately tell us what is 20 feet. We measure from a light pulse to here or there to the sensor, and you get exact clearance. So there's no guessing, right? And so that's, with that kind of technology, we're able to effectively, accurately, and quickly identify risk. And across a huge area, right? Because LiDAR can be flown over 60,000 miles of transmission overhead lines, or I'm sorry, transmission distribution overhead lines, and can be done fairly quickly. If you ask an inspector or a person, it would take an army to measure that, right? And so not beyond that, right? And so it's really important why LiDAR is being used for vegetation management. It's very effective, it's very quick, and it's very accurate, which is most important. It takes the guessing game out, and then with that LiDAR data, we're able to conduct the sag and sway models, which is next. So what factors influence sag and sway? We have structure height, like I mentioned, conductor size, span length, normal emergency readings of that line, which is the engineering loading of that line. And other various factors, but mainly is the height of what you're measuring, it's the temperature of what you're measuring, the load that is engineered for. And then various other factors of vegetation, expected vegetation growth, and obviously the wind, right? Because if you get maximum wind, how far can that line sway? So all the way parallel, and then that's as far as it reach. So obviously we don't have trees that are sit over our transmission lines. Going above clearance shouldn't be an issue. But to the max, all the way 90 degrees, right? And so those are the conditions that help us ensure this wire zone or the right of way, right? If you look at this picture here, those little dash lines, that represents the wire zone, how far this line can sway to the side, and how much the line can sag to the bottom, right? That's the wire zone that you see there represented in the dash lines. And so just a picture of the field, this is what sag and sway looks like, right? You can see the person who's here, they observe the line is very close, it's not actually touching, but you can very well see the line touched before, right? You can see the little orange tips on the vegetation. That tells you that that line definitely touched. It caused the tree to arc, you saw in the video, it caused heat.
Don't move over there.
I know, I feel like when I move, they should come.
Stay in one spot.
It's not even touching the laptop. Anyways, so I mentioned LiDAR is very precise. So I got a lot of information here. I'm not going to read it all, but LiDAR is very precise. And how precise, right? It's accurate down to 3 inches from the distance of between the conductor and vegetation. So that means, again, conductor and vegetation, right? And then you have absolute accuracy of 6 inches on the XYZ coordinate system, right? So anywhere in the world, you have 6 inches of accuracy, which is incredibly good. If anyone has a GPS, you can typically get 30 feet, 60 feet of accuracy on a GPS alone. So you can imagine using GPS to map out, your vegetation or just poles on a map. You have at most 30 feet accuracy, if not greater, right? In canyons where you have weak signals, that really just starts to span, right? And so LiDAR, again, very accurate. That's why we love using it here in vegetation management with SCE. And then the sag and sway models, which I mentioned already, that's why we like using LiDAR, because it's accurate. It tells us exactly how much pounds per square foot that our lines can take, and what direction with the maximum wind, like 55.9 miles per hour, and that gets our line to a direct 90-degree angle. Like I mentioned, that's the farthest that it can sway. I'm not going to read everything else here. I'm going to go over to the next slide. So why do we use LiDAR in UVM inspections? I think the whole audience can answer at this point. It's very accurate. It provides exact clearances, no guessing games, right? And it determines with modeling, it determines risk before we get there. Preventive measures to take to basically mitigate the risk before it becomes a problem. I'm not sure if I want to go over this bottom section here. This represents what LiDAR looks like on a graph, and the maximum line load and conductor temperature. So I explain it many ways, but this is what it looks like on a CAD program. How does SCE utilize this technology to identify the risks? I've said it many times. It's basically a three picture that helps us supports our inspection of nearly 1.3 million trees. So I'm not gonna go too much detail. At this point, you guys can see these very high resolution photos, 3D images of what our lines look like in the vegetation. And so these colors are very important because it's, we classify that LiDAR to have certain colors, and it tells us where our closest encroachments are at. And so remote sensing data, point clustering is what we use. So obviously if I were to measure LiDAR of a tree and a line, you get a bunch of points, right? And so imagine like an edge of a palm tree. You can see a bunch of points next to that line, and then you see every clearance in between. You have, all right, this tree is, you know, this point of the tree is 1 foot from the line. This point of the tree is 3 feet from the line. This point is 5 feet. It can be confusing to look at, right? So we look at the worst offending, or the closest encroachment or measurement to really focus in and dial in on the risk. So again, point clustering technology, basically it's like a filtering. Look at only where the risk is at. So if I have, you know, my arm here is a palm frond next to a distribution line, it measures the closest point between the line and the vegetation. And so it helps us narrow down where the risk is at. I know I'm coming up on time, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is a cross-sectional view. Again, what I just described with my hand, kind of imagine it with these red points here. It can look very confusing, but point clustering helps us dial that down to that, right? Where the risk is at, right? Where are our points closest to determine what we need to do. This is what the field tool looks like. And so again, looking at it from a top, this is what looks, these are basically color-coded points of what our closest encroachments look like, and measurements look like, from vegetation to line. The red points represent what's closest, where we need to absolutely send our inspectors to go look and prescribe work. I have a lot of definitions here, but basically at high level, if you look in the far left, that is what the data looks like when you open it. It tells you everything from what the tree, what the line is, what the survey data of that is, how old that data is, the clearance of the tree to conductor, and then the span length. So it tells you a bunch of variables, but the most important thing that it represents is what's in the box there is the height of the conductor, and then also, I didn't measure it here, but the clearance, which is right there, 8.63 feet. So it tells you an actual value that, you know, that when you press a symbol, you see the actual value. Again, field application, this is what it looks like on our other softwares. That red point, very zoomed in closely, that tells us where the line is closest to the Max and Saxway model, right? So you can see this image here, the line is right over there. There's three little lines traveling, and it's right over there, but you can see the red points are actually there. So what that means is that's the tallest point of the tree, and with that line with a sag and sway, that's where you can have potential tree line contact. So it's like this, and you have a line, and eventually you can go here, right? So that's what it represents. So when you're out at an inspector, it's really hard to tell, because if you see a tree at eye level, it looks like it's as tall as that line, but it doesn't look close enough. What this incorporates is the model if you were to move that line, right, with wind, the sag and sway. And so the field application I mentioned, 18 feet is kind of the 18 inches is general rule of what we try to obtain. I'm sorry, 18 feet is the general distance we try to obtain. I'm not going to go over a lot of details here because this is more technical stuff, but the example I've said many times is in here, so it's in writing form here, but I've went over it a few times, is when basically LiDAR is used to identify risk without the eyes, right? It can see beyond the eye. I'm going to skip a few of those slides that are really technical with the field use. And then one of the last few slides here, what is an appropriate prescription of a tree mitigation? Very simple, but I want to define it here. It's removal, it's trim, which are these categories. You have a crown reduction, which basically you go to a tree, look at the top of the tree, and you just top it to make sure that it doesn't grow into the line, which is called topping or crown reduction. Slope cuts on some trees, which is like a slope cut. To basically, you ever see a line, you see a tree that's trimmed out like this, probably seen it before. We try to avoid that as much as possible because that actually can hurt the tree. We just do a ground side, basically a side trim, which is a ground to sky clearance on the tree. And then, let's see, prescriptions. So work prescriptions based on remote sensing data. It's basically, remote sensing data is what you saw in the cluster points, where you saw points that are really filtered down. It shows you what can be seen, right? It tells you this tree is this tall and it has the potential to sway, the line has potential to sway and touch the tree. And so we use remote sensing or LiDAR to determine whether work needs to be prescribed. It's pretty much what this slide talks about, but a little more technical. And we use our field inspectors to just prescribe that work appropriately for tree crews to go mitigate. And again, this is a picture of right away. I talked about it, but when you're driving by a freeway, and you've probably seen this before, this is basically what a right-of-way looks like underneath our transmission. This is 500 kV. This is actually in Big Creek. This is basically what we want to represent. You can see that line is huge. It's probably, I don't know what the scale is like, but it's a very long span. And you can see how much it sags just by bare weight alone, because the line, you can't keep it taut straight, right? Just by weight alone, it's going to have a natural sag to it, right? With max sag, with max load conditions, it can cause more sag, more sway. And so this is what it looks like in the field and what we want to maintain, right? You look at the bottom, minimum vegetation, and to the side, and to the sides, you want to have a ground to sky clearance to ensure we don't have lines swinging into our vegetation. So this is a summary of remote sensing data and how we use it with our transmission and sub-transmission, and as well as distribution as well. So we start with the top here. We still we basically capture the data, we model it. If there's any trees that are concerning, we mitigate right away. Because sometimes LiDAR will capture, hey, this tree is very close. We mitigate right away. We don't wait until the data is uploaded, we just mitigate right away. From there, with trees that are not like immediate risk, we model that data. And then we have tree crews eventually go out there and achieve our compliance clearances. So that is the end of the presentation. I like to close out too, like LiDAR essentially removes human error. It greatly reduces human error when assessing our vegetation from our line clearances, and has standardized the understanding of vegetation management across the industry, right, and across the world. So like mentioned above, because it has the ability to reduce human error, it will continue to reduce the frequency of our visits with our customers while enhancing the abilities that we have to assess and manage wildfire risks effectively. So that's all I have to say there. Any other questions? Alrighty, thank you.
All right, make sure that's back on. All right, we'll take another couple minutes, stretch your legs, grab some snacks. Like I said, lunch is almost ready. But we have another presenter, Francisco Gonzalez from Cucarankin. Cucarankin. God, I'm gonna get it. But to talk about processing and that kind of stuff as far as the data goes. But feel free to talk to the exhibitors, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes.
See if it's the cable, or is it? Or the outlet. It might be the outlet.
I would also like to show you Reality Cloud Studio from Leica, which is a great point cloud viewing and registration software that's all cloud-based, which is really cool. I think it's, they're going to be in the future. I think we're doing more and more on the cloud. So a little bit background about me and Cooper Rankin. So Cooper Rankin has been around since 1928, which is really cool. Their claim to fame, a lot of people know them from the hand levels, which I don't know how many people know what a hand level is in here. Yeah, still used today. It's really cool. It's just an eyepiece with a level bubble in there, so you can see exactly what's across from you at level. Guys that do dirt work use it all the time still today. We build them in our warehouse with a couple guys down there with the original lathe machines from like the 50s. It's really cool. We also are we're a Leica dealer, we are Inspired Flight dealer, DJI dealer, Wincher dealer, really anything else if you need it in the survey mapping world. We can get it, everything down from your wood stakes, nails, to really expensive LiDAR cables. The thing that makes Cooper Rankin different is we have a team of experts that are more of consultants to our customers. I've been in the drone industry for coming up on 10 years now. I graduated college, I went to Embry-Riddle, got a degree in aeronautics. Once upon a time, as a freshman in college, I wanted to be an airline pilot and realized I'd have to spend way too much time in a CRJ 900 before I started making decent money, so I switched over to UAVs. Out of college, I worked with a multispectral agricultural mapping company. Super fun. We went through the 333 exemptions back when those existed, before Part 107. Part 107, when that came out, was a godsend. After that company, I got with a defense contractor, Textron Systems. I worked with them for 5 years. That's kind of where I got introduced into point cloud mapping for change detection overseas. In military environments, we had a drone, larger wingspan, about 12-foot wingspan. We could stay airborne for 12 hours at a time. We could see a lot of stuff from our camera from pretty far away without other people knowing we were there. So that was a lot of fun. Did that until COVID. I couldn't redeploy overseas, and I transitioned over to the survey and mapping side. Loved it. I actually decided to enroll in College of the Canyons to take their survey program to one day sit for an LS and hopefully be a PLS. So that's a little bit about my background. I brought John Bond with me. He is the regional direct manager for Cooper Rankin in the Southwest. He's a PLS in 6, 7, 5 states now. He's been surveying since the dinosaurs were around. Helps me out on all of my survey questions, and helps me out too when I have clients that are asking those survey questions that I may not have the experience to know. What else? Cool. So LP360. I first started flying a GeoQ system back in 2020. We picked it up in Alabama. And then, like any other company, we spent no time on training. We got the system, and we flew out to Pittsburgh to fly some power lines. Absolutely terrifying to put $100,000 over power lines, which it was funny enough. It took us all day to fly one span. As we got more proficient and efficient, our number was about 12 spans a day. They were spread out. We're not like just back to back. These spans were all over the place, which it was really cool. GeoQ support was phenomenal in helping us understand, what we could do with these LiDAR sensors, how to use LP360. It is an incredibly powerful software that we will barely scratch the surface with today. But like you saw in the last presentation with vegetation analysis for power lines, they have some really cool tools to automatically extract those power lines to do a classification based on how far that vegetation is from the power lines. On more of the survey mapping side, you see I have some of my ground points here in orange. I have a few of them miscalculated. You can see a nice little building there in the bottom right corner. That's half ground, half unclassed, but that's just to show some of the errors you can have with algorithms, right? So one really cool thing that LP360 is doing is they're introducing a AI-based classification tool that's leveraging AI, obviously, to minimize misclassification. And they say it gets you about 90 to 95% of the way there on getting a good ground surface. The next step there, and I'm sure you guys are seeing more and more software companies coming out with it, to have a full classification utilizing AI. So for us, that means you don't have to spend hours staring at a point cloud and manually classifying or manually cleaning up your data. A lot of that is taken care of. So we'll discuss some of those tools. We'll go over how the vegetation penetration, you'll see in here, there's a ditch somewhere in these trees that you wouldn't be able to capture with traditional photogrammetry, right? Because you only get the tops of the trees, maybe some erroneous points down low. What else? Our roadways. So this was flown with the TrueView 540 payload. It's an incredible payload for the price. I've told a few people here, I would fairly confidently pull out curb and gutter data from the point cloud, which is a big ask. If you've worked with photogrammetry or LiDAR data, especially on the aerial side, usually you get a nice kind of soft curve where it's really not accurate information. You'll see here, this is pretty accurate. I would say it would rival on your GPS level, right? If you are doing ADA work and you're doing really precise work, you're gonna have to break out a total station, but it's getting closer. It's getting much better than it was 3 years ago, that's for sure. So we'll kind of check that out, show some really cool tools in LP, and go from there. I'm gonna do the cardinal sin of presenting, and I'm gonna take a seat over here because I gotta manipulate my computer. But feel free to ask questions too throughout. It's fairly informal, just kind of checking out some data. So I have it viewing as a tin surface right now. Before I get into that, let me just give you an overview of LP360. So you see up here on the top, you have all your different tabs, which really support kind of what phase in your data processing you're in. In the project tab, kind of basic stuff where you can save your project, close your project, open up the startup dialog as if you're creating a brand new project. You can add files. So if you already have raster imagery, you can bring that in. If you have feature information like control points, if you have like power lines already, like maybe from PLS CAD, you already have those lines in a shapefile, you can bring that in. Photos from different sources, just a whole bunch of different files you can bring into LP360. Then you have your exports kind of grouped together. Your export wizard is where you can plop out a point cloud. If you want to just export, say, your tree points, your vegetation points, or your ground points, you would come into your export wizard, and there's a few settings you go through, kind of give it an area to export, and then you'll have that as a LS file to share with your clients or other colleagues that need it. LAS is their kind of proprietary file format that helps the software read it quicker. I'm sure everybody's kind of familiar with different file formats. Like Autodesk has an RCP that flies into Revit really well, flies into Recap really well. This is the same idea. And then your final, you can export a land XML tin, which is a super lightweight model you can bring into CAD, Civil 3D, which is where your surveyors are going to pull your contour lines. It's kind of like, that's so funny. We collect tens of hundreds of gigabytes of data, and we water it down to a 500 megabyte tin file. It's kind of how much information we collect is pretty wild. So some different things to just like a layers manager, image explorer that we won't go into. Then you have your support tab. I can't speak any more higher of their knowledge base than they have. It is phenomenal. It gives you information. You can come in here and you can type in, say, ground class. And it pulls up information on all of these different articles, webinars from GeoQ. And it really helps in understanding the tools. I still use it today when I'm going through a process. I'm like, what does this setting mean? What do I need to set for line spacing? Things like that. So those are really good. If you have issues with your data too, you can upload it to support through kind of an FTP file sharing link, which is really handy if they need to get hands-on with your data and figure out why something's not working right. They recently launched a user community, which is growing. I think there's 12 of us in there currently, more every day. But as you guys are familiar with forums, things like that, it's just going to be a very targeted user group in LP360, which I think is going to be really helpful. And our next tab, as we go over, is our sensor processing. So you got to take your raw data, process it into your LAS file. And they make it really easy. Really, you just start from left and work right. You import your raw data. Once it's imported, you just create your flight lines, and I can turn these on. So these were my flight lines for this site. Three flight lines in about, 5 minutes to capture this whole area, which is pretty awesome. And then as you go through it, you get into your trajectory processing, which is using POSPAC and your GPS information to kind of run a PPK solution and geocode all of your LiDAR points to give you a LAS file. In these steps, it also geocodes it or colorizes it so that if I actually switch this over to RGB, you can see it's a RGB. You can see the color here. And if I change this to points, you can see the coloring come in, which is nice. All their LiDAR sensors, pretty much all their LiDAR sensors have a RGB camera built in. So one flight, you get a nice, pretty colored point cloud. And then you have some post-processing steps here. So why would you post-process? You can clip your data so that you're not, so some of the sensors can collect data almost 180 degrees swath. But the further you get on those, your angle of incidences, the more error is going to be in your point cloud. So if you have plenty of coverage, plenty of overlap, you can kind of fine tune that clip angle in, give you a little bit more precise measurements. And then your clip range helps out with noise. As I'm sure if you've seen, sometimes you get noise points from data that's too close or too far away that you're like, this is erroneous. There should be nothing further than 300 feet from me, and there shouldn't be anything closer to 10 feet from me. You can clip that down. Strip-Align is the next tool they have available, and you can actually run this. One second, let me get some water here. It pretty much registers every single flight line against itself to make sure that any further error is out. So you'll mostly see this on, I change this to where it is a file. You can kind of see how it's broken up into different strips from the flight lines. So it will look at these, and on hard features, say a building, if each flight line has a little bit of an error, you can see like 2 roof lines. It may be minuscule, but that tool will eliminate that, which is really helpful. You can do ortho mapping as well in LP360. You can also use Agisoft, an Agisoft-based ortho mapping for a little bit more robust photogrammetry. And a few different options over here that we won't go to, but you can do manual flight lines, things like archiving information, different utilities for calibrating the LiDAR, the camera, you know, DJI PPK for your L1, L2 data is pretty cool. You can actually, say, use a core station instead of your DJI RTK base station, which is nice. And then Job Manager. Job Manager is really important. You can upload jobs into here and monitor their progress, and it kind of works in the background. So it frees up some of your memory. You can also, on some of the jobs, you can still work with your data while something's processing in the background. The next tab is TrueView Go. I don't have any TrueView Go data, but it's their response to the SLAM craze for handheld LiDAR. You can process that as well in LP360, combine it with your aerial data, and get you know, a full complete scan of your site. Map tab, don't really spend a lot of time in here because most of your important functions are right in this toolbar. Control points. So this is a really important task in running your QA/QC for your LiDAR dataset. I don't have any control points in this dataset, but you can place them. You can go in here and pull your control points up. It'll do an accuracy estimation. You can debias your data, either vertically or laterally if you need to, depending on, you know, how your GPS solution was. And then you can produce an accuracy report that you can hand over to your surveyor or, you know, anybody else to prove that your data is legitimate, which, as we learned earlier today, is a huge important part of this whole thing. If you can collect data, you have to show that, you know, 6 feet is really 6 feet, right? And that it's in the right place in the world, so that you can combine it with your total station data, your terrestrial scan data, and any other data. So a few different tools, you know, some more registration information. Point task is a tab that we will spend a lot of time in. This is where you can run, you can see all of my different tools in here. You can customize each and every one of these tools and then save it as a new module. So like I have a few different, like 10 algorithms that I like to run based on the terrain. You can generate seeds based on a few different things. And then I really like, in here you can set up macros, which if you're running tasks that you're constantly running back to back, you can say, hey, I want you to run these 4 tools all back to back. And I'm gonna go walk away for a few minutes and go do something else. And you come back and all of these processes are done. You've streamlined your data extraction substantially. And you're ready to, you know, create your contours, create your tin, all that fun stuff. So like this one, I have set up for doing a power lines extraction. You can set it up also, like here's a ground class one where I like to have it generate some seed points for my ground, which with some really basic functions are saying, hey, in a 15-foot grid, give me the minimum point. And then it does that. And then after it does that, it's going to say, okay, now use my existing ground points, which you just did, and then run this adaptive tin filter to classify the rest of the points, which helps you get to that final product a bit quicker. So really cool things in here. Some more QA/QC tabs, you know, seam line. This is kind of validating that that strip align tool worked. Surface precision and point cloud statistics are similar in the sense that It's just kind of showing you how much noise is in your point cloud in certain areas. Classification. I'm finding myself using this tab less and less because these algorithms are getting better at their job of classifying my data. But you can come in here and like if we change this to our classification view, and like this building over here, like, oh, this is obviously not all ground. You can quickly just come over here, tell it to, I want you to go to unclassified. Press OK. And just box out the roof of this building. Press spacebar, and boom. That's no longer bad ground points. So it makes it just really, really easy. You can kick out outliers. They also have a really cool tree segmentation tool. I will admit I'm not as spooled up on it as I need to be because I don't do a lot of forestry work. But it will cluster your trees together and colorize them so that you can see that, hey, okay, I have X amount of trees in this area. You can even pull some metrics for canopy size and canopy volume, which is pretty awesome. Ground classification. So here's that AI ground classification tool. When it runs, it uploads your point cloud to the cloud, does the ground class, pulls it back down, and you have a nice clean ground class point cloud. It'll look better than the one I have. And this is just one I've been playing with.
Question.
Yep.
So with the AI classification tool, do you have to program that to specify each type of classification, or does it already know?
It only does ground. So it's just identifying points that are on the ground and points that are not ground for now. So it's going to kind of identify these, like if we zoom into like this car, right? How these points kind of climbed up on that car or like climbed up on this roof. It's going to identify that and say, oh, that's a roof. That shouldn't be a ground point. And it's going to kick them out.
And I kind of lost it again, but this is a whole new software package?
LP360 has been around for a while.
How long?
In various forms, I mean, over 15, 20 years. Yeah.
And it was specifically designed for drone use?
Yeah, for aerial mapping. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they have a whole team. They are out of Alabama, so it's all US made. And it was really cool. I went to their conference about a month or two ago and met some of the guys that have been working on this since the very beginning. Yeah, so it's been around for a while.
Are there a lot of drone-specific tools and icons that I see on the items?
Yeah.
Some are more scientific stuff.
Yeah, they're definitely more focused on the drone side. And I mean, you can pull in, all your other data into here, but the bread and butter is the drone data. So cool. Volume. So volumetrics are a huge thing for aerial data, right? How long have we been going around drawing little polygons around a volume, calculating what that cut fill is? You can do that in LP360. So if you just happen to already have your volume areas, say you're going to a site, right, that you are doing quantities at on a monthly basis. That's pretty common for like waste management facilities. You can import your 3D polygons and it will quickly be able to compute, what your stockpiles are and plop out different reports. So you can hand over to a client or you can monitor yourself and move from there. So our next tab is feature edit. In here, let's say, so I drew this corridor. So this is just identifying where these line spans are. And you can come in and say, oh, at this point, this vertex was off a little bit, right? So I can, over here, select edit features, and say my feature layer is corridor. I can select edit vertices, and it should pop up all of my little vertices down here. Yep. And now I can move that feature layer to make adjustments. Oh, and then save it. This is really helpful too for break lines. As you go in, and you can go in the profile view at the same time. Let's just do that. So I'll just draw a quick little. So there's a profile view of my line. Zoom out. Here. Be able to see it. Do this one hand, it's kind of a pain. But yeah, I'm not sure why that one's not working, but it'll show you on the lines. Actually, I have to back up to line 1. But yeah, so you can't move it. Not sure why it's not showing up, but it might be because I don't have it on the ground. If I look at it, let's see what's our elevation on this thing. Yeah, there's no Z values. It's just a 2D line. But for a 3D line, it would show up. You can adjust your elevation, adjust where that line's at, and set a nice, good break line. Whole bunch of different tools. You can also, edit your power line features, project your Z values down onto the ground. So essentially, convert this guy from 2D to 3D. Simplify. Sometimes when you do have it drape along the ground, you'll have hundreds of vertices, which you really don't need. You can simplify that in here, or the opposite. If you go around, you're like, hey, give me a vertice every 5 feet along this feature. You can come in there and respace it.
What about processing of the raw data? How fast can you do that? How well can you do that?
Yeah, so I actually did this. We did a demo with a client and brought them back to our Mount Lake Terrace office, which is in one of these buildings. Downloaded the data, processed it, went through the steps, and it took, actually, do I still have it in here? So if we look at this sensor, it's like less than an hour is what we're talking about. So cool, yeah, this process report on a smaller site, some of these took 2 minutes to do, and that was I'm just remembering this job. Okay, that was up in Yakima. It was about a half-mile long corridor. So it took about, we'll call it 3 minutes to run the trajectories and then geocode the job. So then you have an LAS file. Then after that, you gotta do all your classification, which can take as much time as you want to spend on it. But the actual unpacking and processing the data, your hands-on time is less than 30 minutes by the time you build your project, create your flight lines, run the trajectory processing, have it geocode and colorize, it runs pretty quick. Normally the thing that just takes time is a few clicks for identifying our flight lines, which is a big part. I'm just going to turn, so like this was our trajectory for this site. I was having these guys practice figure eights with our payload on, so you see this mess of scan data in here, which obviously you don't want, right? So part of the whole flight line creating it is you cut out all of that kind of nonsense data that would give you, or nonsense flight time that would kind of mess up your data. You cut that out and only get kind of your mapping flight lines that you want to keep. Does that make sense?
How many data tables? You would cut that out from the data table?
Yeah. I mean, honestly, so like the flight lines, if I go to auto create flight lines and tell it to, hey, the big thing is my minimum length. I shouldn't have any lines that are less than 200 feet. And I press compute flight lines. It's going to look at those trajectory points and create lines that are no less than 200 feet. And then from there, if you're like, hey, I don't want this line because I was flying too fast, I don't want that side line, you can delete it. And you can also control click, which takes 2 hands, which I currently don't have. But boom, those flight lines are gone. It's not going to process that data. It's going to speed up kind of that unpacking time for your raw data and get you to your data extraction point faster. So yeah, you can also do this if you, so that was kind of the automatic way. You can also manually do it. So you can select trajectory points, manually do it, and cut it by GPS time as well. Here we go, yeah, time-based method. So you can say, hey, my flight, the part I care about, was 30 minutes long, but delete the last 50 seconds, ignore the last 60 seconds kind of deal. Honestly, I find the geometry-based method is just way easier, and you guys just saw how quick it was. So we have our flight lines. You can see, I don't want to launch it, but I'll go through the steps so you guys can kind of see it semi-quickly, and then, yeah. And a lot of these are already pre-programmed. It pulls it from the actual sensor. So you see processing mode, we're using a single base. That's what my license is. You can get a smart base or RTX subscription, which is nice because then you don't have to lug around a base station. But your best data is going to be, a nice local single base. I'll process it. This is my observation file. So I just pulled from the Washington State Reference Network system. Pretty cheap. I think it was actually free. You can pull your base station data, bring it on in. This is the survey nail, where that GPS is. And then this is just reviewing your settings. You press submit, it submits it to the job manager, and then pings you when it's done. So once you do that, you'll have, it kind of combines all of these steps for geocoding and colorizing. And then if you have multiple flights for a large area, you can combine them all and strip a line. In here, so you would just say, hey, use this layer, and this one's a fixed layer, so don't move this layer, and it will kind of align everything to that layer, which is really nice. But yeah, and then after that, you're pretty much there, and you're ready to do data extraction. And from here, let me just turn off my flight lines. So this is just my area of interest that I classified for ground. If I wanted to, I can turn off all my other points. Boom. And these are just my ground points. I could spend a little bit more time cleaning up here if I was concerned about this area. But the majority of this flight was, hey, let's, from south of the houses down, you can see where you got your tree data, what we had underneath the trees, the parking lot, this little ditch over here, a couple little bumps in here. And if you guys could actually do it better by elevation. So these are still just my ground points and just my elevation coloring of my ground points. So that's what I was saying, in this area there were a couple little ditches that we really couldn't tell when you had all of the points in there. And then if we click over to this guy, if we take a crosscut, we will run here to there. I'll do a 1/2 foot depth. So these are all of our, let me turn on all points. So you can see this vegetation that was out there, and you kind of saw our vegetation penetration down here. So those little orange spots. Yeah, you guys can see those. Cool. So that's what the algorithm defined as, hey, these are our ground points. And then we told it, okay, anything within, from 1 feet to 3 feet is low veg, 3 feet to 10 feet, medium veg, 10 to 20 feet, or whatever the next range of vegetation is high vegetation. Anything above that is noise. If we scooch in over here to our road cross section, so you can see the nice crown of the road. As we go into the side, we get into our curb data. So we can see a pretty clear curve in here. Kind of as you scroll through, you can see how those points move around. And we're looking at, let's just pull over in, so we still have a 1/2 foot. If we go to a 1/4 foot, I just kind of want to show you guys where our point spread is. If we place everything into about this box that seems to kind of capture, it's really hard for you guys to see, but kind of captures the high and low for the noise. And we're looking at, if we go to the left-hand side, 0.23 to 0.29, so 0.06 of noise on an asphalt surface is pretty dang livable with. And that's with no smoothing. You can run a smoothing algorithm and really, all this data will be within a couple hundreds. But you're smoothing it, so there's kind of an algorithm in there decimating your information down. We were talking about vegetation. We can come over here. Trying to do a wide profile depth on there so you guys can see some of the trees as they come in, and that is probably too wide. I'm just going to change our coloring to that, and let's trim this cut down to 5 feet. Usually looks pretty good. Cool. So you clearly see this little hump in here as we kind of scroll through our data. You can see your outline of your trees. You can see where some of the vegetation in here was just too dense to really get through. Which, I think is just phenomenal for LiDAR to capture. Same thing, I think this is, I'll just do a quick cut of, so we have these power lines in here. Change this to sprint mode. So this is looking at our whole site. These are our points that are being, they're going to change kind of size as we zoom in. but you can kind of see the whole site as we flow around in here. Kind of what these power lines are looking like. It looks a little bit blobby. And if I just, where's my point size tool? We come over here and we're what I want. So this is an unclassified power line. We're looking at all the points. So from 400 feet for a 5-minute flight, you know, not too bad. We got a lot of points on the line. If we pull a cross section of the line, I'll do about a 1-foot line. So you can see all of your point clusters in here, which from there, you can pull out the catenaries, you can pull that information into, you know, PLSS pad, and there's some other software out there too that can take those catenaries and do that vegetation analysis to see if those lines are ever going to touch, which is super critical for, you know, fire protection. And then we can step kind of through those lines. So far, I mean, that's kind of the super duper abbreviated version of everything in LP360 on the processing side. It's, you know, really powerful software. You can do a lot in it. The cool thing is GeoQ does offer free training. All you have to do is fly to beautiful Alabama for a few days, and you know, you can sit through their training course, which I think is a phenomenal thing. Obviously, at Rankin, we also offer training to our partners and clients that need it. And training, I think, is the most valuable thing you can spend your money on. It's just going to speed up your time to learn your software. It's going to make you better at your job, and be able to make more money with the tools that you're paying for. Cool. So I mean, with that kind of, I don't want to keep everybody from the sandwiches and wraps, but if you have any questions, feel free to come see us right over here in the back corner. Grab a business card, shoot me an email, and yeah, go from there. Well, that's it.
All right. One thing to note, since we have this array of exhibitors here, LP360 is what we use, what is being used for processing Wingtra LiDAR data. So, so that's the connection too. One of the things also I wanted to share with this, kind of goes back to what Pete said at the beginning, making the invisible visible, right? So seeing the software, this is how you do it. I always tell my students, I said, isn't it great watching all these shows like on the Discovery Channel where they're like, we found Mayan ruins under, you know, on the floor underneath this jungle canopy. And they flew LiDAR, and then all of a sudden, boom, there they are, right? Tree canopy's gone, and there's these Mayan ruins. And it's like, wow, that's like LiDAR magic. You know, it's really this right here. So they flew it, but it's the classification and cleaning up the data and however long that takes you. But this is the magic that makes those Mayan ruins visible underneath the tree canopy, right? So that's what I just want to kind of let you guys kind of see that. So take appreciation when you watch those shows. Know that there's somebody on the backside that spent about a month or two, you know, kind of going through classifying that for that instant gratification of the show. So with that, we got a couple more guest speakers and presenters after lunch. Chris Edwards from the third floor will be here talking about reality capture and filmmaking and LiDAR use in filmmaking and media. And then we'll talk about how all this stuff works with the Esri ecosystem and kind of what you can do as far as with the data and manipulation and expanse off of that. So be here for that. But right now, I know I'm talking, I'm keeping it from lunch. Right now, help yourself to the sandwiches and wraps and stuff back there. There's drinks still over there. You can still have some fresh fruit and some muffins if you guys want. So we'll be back here about 1:30. Yeah, about 1:30 for the next presentation. So enjoy your lunch.
Just wanted to let them. Let's learn through this. The last main they're from New York. I don't want to go too bad. No, dude. I really like them back in the They're in the back of the art like that.
From an art
That's why I got
I just got in there.
Oh, yeah? Yeah. I've never read it. There's a bunch of outside companies they've been around for a while. It's just depends on their negative.
We'll have more, with Rodney and this stuff and other, we have other companies as well.
That's the word. They're running out.
East County.
Even though it's not.
It's just plastic.
We just started last semester.
Like it is.
Unless you're actually using fusion tie points or using stuff to tie it in. I think I did. That's not the real stuff. Right. Jamming. Well, they have different types. But in the meantime, I've seen those too. Hey guys, touch and then in the meantime, it'll be on the it's 35K. Yeah, you get the LiDAR. Well, I mean, it gets another 40K. And then honestly, what I am doing is you're looking at about 100. Yeah, I guess and then including the computer that's going to take the process. Every time. That was a great question. How big was that? I noticed that square and I must have so I just feel like turn on the water. You know, it's funny, this is second age. I've been a part of aviation for many years. This is and I just go, wow. Same age? Race cars? I think it's a drop it. Well, let's speed it up. That's the put it in the draw. $750 per section. Yeah. So you're but 35. That was 35. Right. Skydio, they didn't charge us that much. Now that it's how many machines do you have? In a classroom.